Chapter 5445. A genius in a second. Remember to go away. To provide you with wonderful novels to read. But if he didn't do this, he could only watch helplessly as the heart of the fruit of consciousness appeared. Without hesitation, Linny made a decision. When his primordial spirit came to the side of the heart of the fruit of consciousness, he decisively transformed into his primordial spirit form. His hand's speed burst to the limit, and he instantly plucked it. Success! But before he could rejoice, and before he could transform into his primordial spirit form again, Linny was instantly sucked in. This was the very center of the invisible black hole, and even he had no room to resist. Boss! Bing Wuching was shocked. Although she was mentally prepared for this, when it really happened, she was still caught unprepared. Linny had actually followed in the footsteps of Bai Jingze and Chu Tianliang. What should she do? Based on her previous absolutely rational style, she would definitely turn around and leave at this time. However, after experiencing the primordial trial, she had learned from her mistakes. If she was really stupid enough to make the same mistake again, she would not be Bing Wuching. I'll go find boss. If you want to leave, you can stay. Bing Wuching casually told Chu Tianlu and Zhang Qingfeng, and then walked straight to the sacrificial altar. Chu Tianlu pondered for a moment, and then decided, I'll go too. Then I won't go. Take care, you too. Only Zhang Qingfeng chose to stay. Although he had not gained anything from this trip to Tai Snake Island so far. For him, being able to stay alive was already the biggest gain. This journey was too thrilling, and the sacrificial altar in front of him was too frightening. He did not want to rashly be buried with it. After all, it would not do him any good. Although it was a little dangerous to leave this place alone, it was obviously much better than being hot-headed and rushing into the sacrificial altar to be buried with it. After all, he was not stupid. Bing Wuching and Chu Tianlu did not say anything about Zhang Qingfeng's retreat. After all, it was human nature. In fact, Bing Wuching was extremely surprised by Chu Tianlu's decision. Along the way, she had always thought that he was a burden, but now she had a whole new level of respect for him. As for Zhang Qingfeng, he had always been a traitor. If not for Chu Tianlu's presence, Bing Wuching would have sent him on a free trip to outer space with a slap. Ignoring Zhang Qingfeng, who had retreated alone, Bing Wuching and Chu Tianlu jumped onto the sacrificial platform one after another. Then, as expected, with a flash of white light, the two of them disappeared from the sacrificial platform without a trace. On the other side, Lin Yi, who had entered the formation ahead of time, saw nothing but darkness and chaos. He felt as if his entire body had been compressed. Even though this was not his original body, but his Yuanshan body, this feeling was still very obvious. However, he had never experienced something like this before, so he did not know whether it was an illusion or reality. However, this feeling soon passed. The next moment, Linny found himself standing in a narrow area that was less than a square meter. All he could see was darkness all around him, and he could not see anything at all. Fortunately, his divine senses had returned to normal, and were no longer restricted like before, so he did not become blind. Linny subconsciously took a step to the side and jumped down. He wanted to check if there was another bottom below the territory, and what the situation was like down there. In the end, this jump did not matter, but it scared Linny so much that he broke out in a cold sweat. This place was so deep that he could not see the bottom. Linny fell several thousand meters down with a swoosh, which was almost as deep as Mount Everest. He was so scared that he could only transform into his Yuanshan body and fly back up again. After returning to the small territory, Linny did not impulsively try again. This place was very strange. It was such a small place, but it was suspended in midair without any foundation. How did this happen? However, ever since he came to the immemorial small world, Lin Yi's understanding was refreshed again and again. Even if there was such a strange thing under his feet, it was not surprising. After all, there were all kinds of powerful people in the immemorial small world. After standing still, Linny began to study the strange territory under his feet. He squatted down and reached out his hand to touch it back and forth. However, after touching it, he was very surprised. This was because Linny discovered that the narrow territory under his feet was not made of ordinary soil and stone. Instead, it was actually some kind of extremely rare scale. From the texture, it was quite similar to snake scales. However, how could a normal snake scale be so big? If this really was a snake scale, then how big was the body of this snake? Could this be the snake scale of the Thai snake? Lenny muttered to himself in shock. If his guess was true, then it was simply unimaginable. However, considering the special nature of this place, since the entire Thai snake island was formed by the Thai snake, then it made sense that the scale under his feet was the snake scale of the Thai snake. However, this thing was floating in midair. What was it relying on? And if he landed on it, then where did Bai Jingze and Chu Tianliang, who came in earlier, go? They were also not on this small snake scale territory. Could it be that they fell down? But how could he be so lucky? Or could it be that there were many snake scales here, and he was only standing on one of them, while Bai Jingze and Chu Tianliang fell on other snake scales? Of course, this speculation was the most likely. Just as Lenny was speculating, suddenly, a croaking sound came from the distant sky. It sounded very ear-piercing and noisy. Lenny was immediately shocked. His divine sense probed into the distance. He clearly sensed that 5 strange-looking monsters were flying towards him at high speed. These monsters clearly had snake heads, but the bodies of crocodiles. Lenny was immediately stunned. Could it be that these were the hybrids of the ancient Thai snake and the sky-devouring giant crocodile? It wouldn't have mattered if it was just their strange appearances. But what really surprised Lenny was that every single one of these monsters had the strength of a golden core. This was quite rare in the small world of the ancient times. After all, any golden core practitioner in the small world of the ancient times was considered a high level of fighting power, and golden core spirit beasts were the same. It was truly rare to see a group of them. Needless to say, these snake-headed, crocodile-bodied monsters were obviously coming for Lenny. Each of them bared their fangs and brandished their claws, as if he was a prey that had delivered itself to their doorstep. Lenny frowned slightly. However, since they came with ill intentions, he naturally wouldn't be polite. He raised his hand and a 5 elements killing aura shot out. Xiao! Without any deviation, the 5 elements killing aura hit the head of the most ferocious monster. However, the result caused Lin Yi's heart to suddenly tremble. This guy didn't seem to feel any pain or injury. It actually completely ignored the attack of the 5 elements killing aura. This made Lin Yi really a little speechless. The things in this Thai snake island were really strange. Could it be that it was immune to attacks like the illusion worms that he had encountered previously? Or could it be that this guy's skin and flesh had already reached a certain level? Chapter 54-46. Seeing that the group of monsters was getting closer and closer, Lin Yi had no choice but to dodge for the time being. After all, this place was too small. If he was not careful, he might be knocked down by these thick-skinned fellows. Fortunately, their speed was not fast, and they only relied on their mouths and tails to attack. Even if the ground under his feet was narrow, with Lin Yi's movement technique, it was still easy for him to dodge. But soon, Lin Yi could not relax, because he was shocked to find that more and more snake-headed, crocodile-bodied monsters were rushing over here quickly, like a group of sharks smelling blood in the deep sea. In a short period of time, there were more than 100 of them. More than 100 gold core stage spirit beasts. If this lineup was released, it would probably be enough to make the entire ancient small underworld suffer. Even in the heavenly stage island, such a scale could only be seen in the South Island, and it would not appear in other places. Of course, with Lin Yi's level, he wouldn't be scared by these monsters. It was just that he couldn't use martial arts to kill these monsters, and he couldn't find an effective way to attack them. This was a real headache. At first, there were only 5 of them, and Lin Yi could still rely on his movement technique to dodge, but now there were more than 100 of them, and he was surrounded in all directions. How could he dodge? Moreover, this was only the first batch, and there was still a large group coming. This simply made Lin Yi speechless. What the hell is this place? Fortunately, Lin Yi could transform into a spirit, and these monsters did not seem to have any means to attack the spirit, so he could sit back and relax for the time being. But this was not a long-term solution after all. Occasionally, when he found a few gaps, Lin Yi transformed into a spirit and quickly tried a variety of attack methods. He knew a variety of martial arts, and after trying them one by one, there would always be an effect. The result was as expected. Although most of the martial arts did not have any effect, when he began to try strong fire attribute martial arts, such as the Raging Flame Thousand Bursts Fist, these snake-headed, crocodile-bodied monsters finally began to have casualties. Even so, the effect was not very good, and even after trying a few times, he could only kill a few scattered, far less than when he dealt with the illusion worms. This efficiency could not even compare to the endless number of monsters swarming over from all directions. It could even be said to be meaningless. However, when Lin Yi began to try to use the true Qi Dan fire bomb, the situation finally began to change. It was unknown what had caused these snake-headed, crocodile-bodied monsters to be extremely afraid of the true Qi pill fire bomb, this kind of pure energy attack method. It was basically the same as when the illusionary insects had encountered the fire attribute martial skill. They would die upon contact, and they would perish upon contact. A true Qi pill fire bomb would immediately cause a large number of them to fall. The scene was quite spectacular. With that, Lin Yi relaxed a lot. Although he could ignore these snake-headed, crocodile-bodied monsters in his primordial spirit form, this place was strange and unpredictable. Who knew if there would be other unknown risks? To be on the safe side, it was better to maintain the form of the primordial spirit as much as possible, and the existence of the true Qi Dan fire bomb gave him the confidence to stand firm. Otherwise, he couldn't even stand firm, and his heart would be empty. On one hand, he used the true Qi Dan fire bomb to clean up the snake-headed, crocodile-bodied monsters nearby, and on the other hand, he used his divine sense to explore everything around him. Apart from observing the environment, Lin Yi also wanted to see if Bing Wuqing and the others had followed him in. He could handle this situation, but if Bing Wuqing had to deal with it, she would be at a loss. After all, not everyone could use this kind of energy-type attack, and only alchemists and weapon-forging masters could do it. Of course, some of the primordial spirits could also do it. Indeed, Lin Yi's guess was right. At this moment, Bing Wuqing and Chu Tianlu were sweating profusely, because they had stepped onto the sacrificial altar together. They were fortunately transported to the same primordial serpent scale. However, the two of them were facing the same situation as Lin Yi, the snake-headed, crocodile-bodied monsters that were crazily encircling them from all directions. Lin Yi was still fine. Even if he couldn't find a way out at the beginning, he could always protect himself. However, it was different for the two of them. Once they were surrounded, they would almost certainly die. One could even say that they were surrounded by perilous situations. Faced with this group of unreasonable golden core monsters, if Chu Tianlu was alone, he would have been long dead by now. Fortunately, he had Bing Wuqing, who was at the peak of the early stage of the nascent soul realm, with him. Although he didn't know any pure energy-type attack methods like the true Qi Dan fire bomb, his ice-type martial arts techniques were somewhat effective against these monsters. Coupled with his level advantage, it wouldn't be a big problem for him in the short term. One by one, the snake-headed, crocodile-bodied monsters were frozen into ice sculptures, and they fell into the bottomless darkness. It was a pity that there were too many of them, and there was no end to them. Even if Bing Wuqing was exhausted to death, she wouldn't be able to kill them all. Instead, there would only be more and more of them. As for Chu Tianlu, who was standing back-to-back with Bing Wuqing, he couldn't be of any help at all. Against any snake-headed, crocodile-bodied monster, his meager strength wouldn't even be enough to tickle it. He was purely a burden. Chu Tianlu couldn't help but feel a little regretful. He didn't regret charging in recklessly to his death, but he regretted that he was too weak. He couldn't do anything even if he tagged along. Instead, he would only become Bing Wuqing's burden. He really felt bad about it. The only thing he could do at this time was to observe his surroundings and search for Lin Yi's position, while Bing Wuqing was busy fighting these monsters. Unfortunately, even this was difficult for him to do. After all, it was pitch black here. He could only rely on his divine sense to sense everything, and he was only at the foundation building stage. No matter how much the ancient martial world valued the cultivation of divine sense, there was still a threshold that couldn't be bypassed by the level of one's strength. The divine sense of an expert at the foundation building stage had a very limited range. Under such circumstances, how could he possibly locate Lin Yi? Fortunately, they weren't the only ones looking for Lin Yi. Lin Yi was also looking for them at the same time. With Lin Yi's strength, it would be troublesome for him to find someone in a place like this. However, if he was determined to find him, he wouldn't be completely helpless. After all, Bing Wuqing and Chu Tianlu hadn't entered this place for long. The snake scales that they were on shouldn't be too far away from each other. If it weren't for the fact that they couldn't see clearly in the darkness, they could basically be seen with the naked eye. Of course, this was also thanks to Lin Yi's divine sense having a large enough range. Otherwise, if they were both in the dark, they would have to go around in circles for the rest of their lives, if they were unlucky. Chapter 54-47. As for those monsters, they gradually dispersed after Lin Yi transformed into a primordial spirit and flew up. They seemed to know that attacks on primordial spirits were ineffective, or that they couldn't sense primordial spirits, or that they were only interested in the prey standing on the primordial snake scale, and were automatically ignored once they left the primordial snake scale. In short, when Lin Yi flew away, these monsters didn't chase after him, which made Lin Yi heave a sigh of relief. No matter which speculation it was a good thing. In fact, he couldn't see in the dark, but the distance between Lin Yi, Bing Wuqing, and Chu Tianlu wasn't particularly far. Using the unit of measurement in the secular world, it was only about 2 or 3 kilometers. When Lin Yi got closer, he could clearly sense the situation not far away. Bing Wuqing was using her ruthless ice force to knock down the monsters one by one, which surprised Lin Yi a little. This move was effective, but Lin Yi's divine sense was much stronger than Bing Wuqing's. Although these monsters fell down after being frozen, the ice on their bodies automatically broke after falling a few hundred meters, and they flew up again. In other words, Bing Wuqing had been doing useless work. Of course, he thought that the monsters would be destroyed after being frozen, but he didn't know that these things weren't afraid of the cold at all. They didn't freeze to death at all. Lin Yi shook his head. If this went on, Bing Wuqing and Chu Tianlu would die sooner or later, and there would be no second outcome. Of course, Bing Wuqing was also sweating profusely at this moment. He also realized that something was wrong, and that was the number of monsters was increasing. Of course, he didn't know that some monsters were resurrecting, and only thought that they were flying over from afar. Tianlu, although I've always looked down on you, I'm impressed that you're not afraid at this moment. Even in the face of imminent disaster, Bing Wuqing still had a calm expression. I'm afraid we're in a hopeless situation this time. Are you afraid of death? I'm not afraid of death, but I'm a little regretful and self-blaming. I brought you all to this place, only to bring disaster upon us. Chu Tianlu sighed. If Lin Yi hadn't saved him, he would have died a long time ago. Thus, dying again wasn't a big deal. However, Lin Yi was his savior. It didn't matter if he died. But what about Lin Yi? What about Bing Wuqing? Chu Tianlu wasn't stupid. He knew that Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing were definitely figures who could stand at the pinnacle of the immemorial martial world. Even if they didn't have the heart of the fruit of consciousness, they weren't weak. If they died here, it would be too much of a pity. However, there was no point in talking about it now. He didn't want to be pretentious either. Big brother Bing, why don't we jump down? We might be able to survive. Let's wait and see. Bing Wuqing didn't want to give up. She was still trying to figure out a solution. Brother Lin is here. Chu Tianlu released his divine sense to check out the situation under his feet. As a result, he almost jumped up in joy, because he finally sensed Lin Yi's presence within the range of his pitiful divine sense. He immediately cried out in excitement. In this kind of situation, Lin Yi was practically a life-saving straw. Otherwise, Bing Wuqing would be exhausted if she continued to hold on alone. As for him, he wouldn't be able to help at all. Big brother. Bing Wuqing sensed it even earlier than Chu Tianlu. However, although she was excited, she wasn't as optimistic as Chu Tianlu. The snake-headed, crocodile-bodied monsters in front of them were endless. Even Lin, he wouldn't be able to handle them easily. At this moment, he couldn't hold on much longer. With his current strength at the peak of the early stage of the nascent soul realm, he could definitely kill a bunch of ordinary golden core experts or spiritual beasts easily. However, he really didn't have many ways to deal with these thick-skinned monsters. He barely managed to kill a few dozen of them, and the vital energy in his body was almost depleted. However, what happened next made him prostrate himself in admiration. A core fire bomb of vital energy had directly killed a large number of them. There were at least 180 of them, which was twice as much as what he had achieved after fighting for so long. He had to admit that Big Brother Lin Yi's strength was truly unparalleled. As for the weak Chu Tianlu, he was even more astonished. At his level, he could only kneel down and worship Big Brother Lin Yi. He was a consummate Foundation establishment expert, and he could easily kill dozens of snake-headed, crocodile-bodied monsters. However, Lin Yi could easily and happily kill dozens of snake-headed, crocodile-bodied monsters with a core fire bomb of vital energy. The gap between their levels was so huge that there was no need to compare them. With the addition of a powerful expert like Lin Yi, the two of them were quickly relieved of their crisis. The monsters surrounding them were wiped out, and they could finally heave a sigh of relief. "Are the two of you all right?" Lin Yi landed on the ground. He could tell at a glance that the two of them weren't really injured. They were just a little weak. "We're fine." Bing Wuqing's breathing was a little heavy. This was a sign that she had consumed too much vital energy. As for Chu Tianlu, he was completely fine. He finally had the time to observe his surroundings. He said thoughtfully, "This place, could it be the place recorded in the books?" "What?" Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing were stunned at the same time. They looked at each other and asked anxiously. "Regarding Taishi Island, the books vaguely mentioned a very special fourth-dimensional space," said Chu Tianlu. Fourth-dimensional space? Lin Yi was shocked when he heard that. There was actually someone in the ancient Jianghu who knew about this. "I'm not too sure about the specifics. The records are very vague. It seems that someone came in and left, which is why the records were left behind. However, there's no other supporting information in this regard, so it's hard to say whether it's true or not. I just feel that it's a little similar to the situation we're in right now. I'm not too sure about the specifics," Chu Tianlu explained, shaking his head. Although it sounded a little far-fetched, it was honestly not easy for someone at Chu Tianlu's level to have such knowledge. Moreover, to a certain extent, this place gave Lin Yi the feeling that it was a certain fourth-dimensional space. Everything was strange in every direction. Not long after, another wave of monsters surrounded them. Fortunately, Lin Yi was present, so it only took 2 or 3 vital energy elixir fire bombs to deal with them. Bing Wuqing only needed to consume elixirs to quickly recover her vital energy. "Boss, what should we do next? We can't just stay here and fight the monsters, can we? It's not a problem to fight a batch of monsters when they come." Bing Wuqing, who had finished regulating her breath and recovered her strength, asked with a radiant face. Although she had some doubts in her heart, she was no longer as worried as before. Chapter 54-48. "Of course it's nothing. It's fine as long as I've found you." Lin Yi nodded and said. He had been thinking of countermeasures all this while. "I want to continue forward and see what's going on here, and see if there's any possibility of getting out." "That makes sense, but..." Bing Wuqing stopped talking. He was a little embarrassed. "Boss, with the strength of Tianlu and I..." "Yeah, Brother Lin, if you leave, the two of us will basically be waiting for death here," Chu Tianlu added, blushing. "Heh." Lin Yi smiled faintly and said, "I've already thought of this situation. I've also found a way to restrain these monsters. I can teach Bing Wuqing the technique I used to attack those monsters just now. I believe that with her talent, she'll be able to learn it in no time." "Ah." Bing Wuqing was slightly taken aback. She looked at Lin Yi in surprise, and her heart was filled with gratitude. After all, things like mental cultivation methods and martial arts techniques were secrets that were not passed down even in the small immemorial underworld. Otherwise, Shui Jianfeng would not have used the excuse of Lung Lung privately teaching Lin the mental cultivation methods, and martial arts techniques of the Snow Sword sect, as a means of attack and manipulation back at the Snow Sword sect. Yet, Lainey was willing to teach her such an awesome technique, without holding anything back. At this moment, Bing Wuqing truly felt that she had followed the right boss, especially since he had such a dishonorable history. It's like this. Actually, this technique is very simple. You guys definitely won't be able to learn the alchemy fire bomb. Lainey did not hesitate, and said straightforwardly. After all, alchemy fire is a skill of an alchemist. What, Brother Lin, you're an alchemist? Chu Tianlu was a little shocked. Of course, Bing Wuqing didn't find it strange at all. Although alchemists were also very rare in the immemorial little Jianghu, it made sense for Lin Yi to be an alchemist, if he could take out a bunch of high-level elixirs so casually. However, Lin Yi waved his hand. He did not have the time to explain these things. He said directly, "This is a simple compression of vital energy." As he spoke, Lin Yi explained the technique of compressing the vital energy bomb to Bing Wuqing. Actually, it wasn't much of a secret. Before reaching the heavenly Tao realm, the vital energy bomb possessed unparalleled lethality. With this technique, Lin Yi could be said to be invincible. When he fought against Ma Zhu, Lin Yi relied on this killer weapon. However, with the passage of time, this skill wasn't considered a very powerful move at the heavenly Tao realm, much less at the magnate realm. Bing Wuqing was a little shocked to hear that. She had not expected that a simple compression of vital energy could be used to attack these monsters. As the saying went, those who knew how to do it wouldn't be difficult for those who knew how to do it. If not for Lin Yi's guidance, they would probably never have thought of such a method. When Lin Yi explained it, he did not hide it from Chu Tianlu, because there was no need for it. One more person meant more strength. Although Chu Tianlu was only at the foundation establishment realm, he could relieve some of the pressure on Bing Wuqing. Indeed, Bing Wuqing was very talented in terms of comprehension. It didn't take long for her to fully understand the profoundness of the vital energy bomb. As a cultivation genius of the Chu family, Chu Tianlu was no fool either. He was just a little slower than Bing Wuqing. Seeing that the third batch of monsters had appeared, Lin Yi deliberately chose not to take action. Instead, he gave the opportunity to Bing Wuqing and Chu Tianlu to practice. The moment the ice elemental vital energy bomb was released, a swath of monsters dropped their corpses. Although Chu Tianlu could not attack in batches like Bing Wuqing, he kept an eye on those that slipped through the net. In this way, the two of them complemented each other, and Lin Yi could leave with peace of mind. After giving the two of them some elixirs to quickly recover their physical strength, Lin Yi threw out a vital energy pill fire bomb and blew up the third batch of monsters. Then, he transformed into his primordial spirit and floated away under the admiring gazes of Bing Wuqing and Chu Tianlu. Darkness. It was endless darkness before his eyes. Lin Yi could only fly forward for a few hundred meters before he could no longer see the situation behind him. All he could see was pitch-black darkness. Fortunately, Lin Yi's divine sense was strong enough, so he did not lose his way. Otherwise, it would be very easy for an ordinary person to walk in circles, or walk in a pitch-black place like this. It would not be easy for them to maintain a straight line. This was also the reason why many people would run into trouble while walking in the dark. Some of them were not really walking in circles, but because they thought they were walking in a straight line, when in fact, they were walking in circles. Of course, this problem did not exist when it came to Lin Yi. After flying forward for a few kilometers, Lin Yi suddenly moved and stopped, because he realized that there were sounds of fighting not far away, which meant that there should be people there. Could it be Bai Jingze and Chu Tianliang who came in earlier? Why were these two idiots not dead yet? Lin Yi was a little puzzled. Logically speaking, with their weak combat strength, they should have been killed by these monsters in seconds. How could they have lasted until now? Could there be others? Lin Yi's heart stirred, and his primordial spirit flew over. However, the next moment, Lin Yi was shocked. He could not believe his own eyes, because Chu Tianliang was actually fighting monsters. This guy could actually control vital energy fire, and he could even use vital energy fire bombs. Could it be that this traitorous brother of the Chu family was a genius? But Lin Yi thought about it. Even Kong Ming Ming could research vital energy fire bombs. It was not a rare thing for this Chu Tianliang to be able to instigate it. Although Bai Jingzi did not know anything, and could only be a burden by the side, reaching this stage, Chu Tianliang did not wish for Bai Jingzi to die instead. After all, in this boundless darkness, it was very good to have an acquaintance as a companion. If Chu Tianliang was left alone, this would be too damn lonely. At this moment, although he was tired of dealing with it, he still found time to talk to Bai Jingzi, not letting himself give up. If there was no one to accompany him, then he was very likely to directly give up at this point, because this rhythm of fighting monsters was too dull. Jingzi, what the hell do you think this is? Give me another qi returning pill. I can't hold on anymore. Chu Tianliang roared in a hoarse voice. Oh, okay. Bai Jingzi did not dare to neglect, and hurriedly took out a qi returning pill from his bosom, and sent it into Chu Tianliang's mouth. Although these medicinal pills were his, there was no distinction between them at this time. Chu Tianliang was his only hope. If Chu Tianliang died, then he would not be far from death. Puffed. Lin Yi looked at the scene in front of him, and let out a burst of cold laughter. Of course, he did not plan to help at all. These two guys were left to fend for themselves, and Lin Yi was also too lazy to make a move to end them. He would just let them suffer here. Chapter 54-49. It's Lin Yi. Why is he flying in the sky? How did he do it? Bai Jingzi looked at Lin Yi, who was flying in the sky, as if he had seen a ghost. He had a dumbfounded expression. Lin Yi was so close to them. If they still couldn't sense him, they wouldn't be cultivators. However, their attention was all on the monster just now, and they simply didn't notice someone flying over. Hee. Lin Yi looked at the two of them mockingly. You two seem to be having fun fighting monsters, and can even create your own group attack. Not bad, not bad. Continue, I won't disturb you anymore. You. Bai Jingzi was unbearably angry, but he couldn't do anything to Lin Yi. Bai Jingzi was only angry, but Chu Tianliang was completely shocked. How was this possible? Wasn't Lin Yi trapped by his shadow-devouring cover? How could this guy be fine and even fly in the sky? What the hell was this? Wait, you didn't die? Chu Tianliang couldn't help but ask. I died, and I'm only a primordial spirit now. However, I don't plan on finding you for revenge, so let's meet again. Lin Yi grinned, turned around, and was about to fly away. Chu Tianliang naturally didn't believe this nonsense. Shadow-devouring cover's name was shadow-devouring, and it could devour shadows. In fact, from a certain perspective, shadows were a part of a cultivator's primordial spirit. Since the primordial spirit was devoured, how could it still be alive? Bai Jingzi didn't care about this. His eyes turned, and he suddenly shouted, Brother Lin, I was also forced. You know that I'm Chu Tianlu's good brother. Take me away, I was forced. It was this guy who forced me to come back for revenge. As he spoke, Bai Jingzi pointed at Chu Tianliang, and had a look of righteous indignation. Chu Tianliang was almost stupefied from anger. How could this person be so shameless? Is that so? Lin Yi seemed to smile, yet not smile. Yes, I can swear. Bai Jingzi's shamelessness was unparalleled. Bai, what's the meaning of this? Chu Tianliang couldn't compare to Bai Jingzi. He and Chu Tianlu were like fire and water, and the same was true for Lin Yi. Thus, he could only choose to continue opposing them. I didn't mean anything. Chu Tianliang, you forced me to bring you back to frame brother Chu Tianlu. I didn't want to take the side of the evildoer, but unfortunately, I couldn't beat you. Bai Jingzi said painfully. It's all thanks to brother Lin's great fortune and great life. After surviving a great disaster, one is bound to have good fortune in the future. I'm sorry, but I still can't take you away, Lin Yi said embarrassedly after seeing him finish acting. He was considering whether or not to set up a film company in the immemorial underworld. This Bai Jingzi could definitely play the lead role. Why? Bai Jingzi was surprised. Do you think that if I really had that ability, I wouldn't have brought Chu Tianlu and the others along? Do you see anyone else around me? Lin Yi shrugged and said regretfully. Bai Jingzi suddenly realized that the truth seemed to be true. Did this mean that he had begged him for nothing? He was really unlucky. Not only did he fail to achieve his goal, but he also offended Chu Tianliang. This was really an unlucky year. With that in mind, Bai Jingze turned his gun to Chu Tianliang. Tianliang bro, don't misunderstand. I was just trying to get some information on this guy's flying method. And now that I've gotten the method, you can learn it too, right? I'm actually on the same side as you. Okay. Chu Tianliang was angry and amused at the same time. However, he and Bai Jingze were originally a temporary team, so they really didn't have a deep relationship. If it weren't for the snatching of the divine knowledge fruit's heart, they would not have fallen into this situation. Although he really wanted to kick Bai Jingze down, he could still use this guy for the time being. It was not good to make their relationship too stiff, so he continued to say, I understand. Let's not worry about Lin Yi. He can do whatever he wants. You try it and see if you can compress the qi in your body, and then release an attack. Just like how I compressed the qi with the alchemy fire. Lin Yi couldn't help but be a little surprised after hearing this. He couldn't tell that this Chu Tianliang was really a genius. He actually thought of a way to crack it in such a short time, and even asked Bai Jingze to imitate him. Although the name was not the qi bomb that Lin Yi came up with, the alchemy fire bomb, because there was no such thing as a bomb here, it was still similar to alchemy fire compression. Bai Jingze quickly nodded and began to try, and Lin Yi was too lazy to waste time with these two idiots. In Lin Yi's opinion, even if Bai Jingze and Chu Tianliang fought the monster together, they would eventually die of exhaustion. After all, the strength of these two people was really too low. They were not at the same level as Bing Wuqing at all. And even if a weakling like Bai Jingze learned the qi bomb, he would only be a support. After all, his own strength was still there. Turning his head and continuing to fly forward, Lin Yi once again entered the endless darkness. He didn't know what was in front of him, and whether there was an exit. And even if he found one, he still couldn't think of a good way to bring Bing Wuqing and Chu Tianlu out. He could fly, but these two couldn't. This was the first time Lin Yi felt like he didn't know what to do. In this uncanny space, even those magnate masters of mountain opening and earth opening wouldn't be able to do anything. After flying for an unknown amount of time, Lin Yi once again heard the sounds of fighting coming from ahead. This time, Lin Yi was completely surprised. There was someone else. Then who was this person? When did he come in? Was it because of the trial on Taishi Island this time? Or did he stay here since the last time? If it was the last time, it was really amazing that he could persist for such a long time. But even if he came in from the trial on Taishi Island this time, it was not easy. After all, Lin Yi and the others had been here for some time, and this person had come in before them. Lin Yi approached the sound, wanting to see what was going on. But when the person who was fighting fell into the range of Lin Yi's divine sense, Lin Yi couldn't help but widen his eyes. Ling Tianyu. It was actually Ling Tianyu. Why was he here? The next moment, Lin Yi seemed to have guessed something. Previously, Ling Tianyu said that he was going to do something big in the Snakehead Island. Because it was very dangerous, he didn't bring Lin Yi and the others, but chose to go alone. Could it be that this was what Ling Tianyu was talking about? His goal was also the heart of the fruit of consciousness? And then he was also transported here? But Lin Yi still felt very strange. How did Ling Tianyu, a cultivator at the peak of the late stage of Foundation establishment, deal with this group of golden core monsters? This was simply unscientific. Chu Tianliang could attack monsters in batches, because he was an alchemist. The power of the pill fire bomb could completely defeat enemies of a higher realm. This was something that Lin Yi knew best. Chapter 5450. However, under Lin Yi's careful observation, he noticed something unusual. This 1,000 blades simultaneous attack was different from the martial arts he usually used. This time, although it was also a 1,000 blades simultaneous attack, the target of the attack was one point. All the flying needles shot towards one point at the same time, and that was one of the monsters in this group. Oh! A blood-curdling scream rang out. Even the thick-skinned monster was pierced by the needles at this moment. One had to know that Ling Tianyu's strength wasn't weak, especially in the 1,000 Blades sect. His sparring partners were at least at the gold core stage. It wasn't too strange for 1,000 flying needles to pierce through a gold core stage monster. However, perhaps only Ling Tianyu could use this kind of fighting method. What made Lin Yi feel strange was that although his fighting method was effective, it was very clumsy. He could only kill one monster after half a day, and there were still many monsters around him. How did he persist for such a long time? Why didn't the other monsters take advantage of the situation to attack him? Another thing that made Lin Yi feel strange was that there weren't many monsters around Ling Tianyu. In fact, there weren't even as many monsters around Chu Tianliang's side. One had to know that Chu Tianliang could still attack in batches, but Ling Tianyu had to fight them one by one. They weren't on the same order of magnitude. After discovering this problem, Lin Yi wasn't in a hurry to help. Since Ling Tianyu could persist for so long, he naturally had his own way of survival. Lin Yi wanted to see how he did it. Was it because the number of monsters here was low? Or was there some other unknown secret? The next moment, a scene that made Lin Yi even more strange appeared. He saw Ling Tianyu's hand shake, and his signature ribbon fluttered in the air. The ribbon instantly straightened with a swoosh, and then there was another ear-piercing sound as it shot towards the monster that was pierced through like a sharp arrow. The monster was wrapped in the ribbon. Ling Tianyu hooked his hand again, and the monster fell into his hand. This series of movements was done in one go, as if he had practiced it many times. Just as Lin Yi was wondering why Ling Tianyu was doing this, Ling Tianyu reached into the monster's wound and pulled. The skin of the monster was torn open, revealing the flesh inside. Was this guy thinking of eating the monster raw? Lin Yi looked at Ling Tianyu with interest. Next, Ling Tianyu did not go to eat the monster. Instead, he used his hand to dig something out of the monster's body. Soon, a small red leather bag appeared in his hand. It looked like a spiritual knowledge fruit, but it was not a spiritual knowledge fruit. This thing was similar to the inner core of a spirit beast, but the inner core was hard, while the thing in Ling Tianyu's hand was soft and elastic. This could be seen from the dent in the small leather pouch when he held it. After getting the inner core, Ling Tianyu casually threw the monster's body. Then, without any delay, he threw the inner core in the direction of the group of monsters with his other hand. The inner core flew out of Ling Tianyu's hand. With the power of the Thousand Blades technique, Ling Tianyu was very familiar with throwing this inner core. Wherever he pointed, it would hit. With a loud bang, the inner core hit one of the monsters and immediately caused a huge explosion. Of course, this explosion was not important. The key was that the monster that was hit was blown to pieces, revealing the small inner core in its body. And this inner core was immediately detonated. As a result, the monsters in the air were like a chain reaction of explosions. Boom, 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 boom. In a short while, all of them were blown to bits. This scene made Lin Yi, who was watching from the side, widen his eyes. What was going on? Previously, when Ling Tianyu took out the monster's inner core and used it as a bomb weapon, Lin Yi was already very shocked. Now, he could even cause a chain reaction. Now Lin Yi knew that no wonder Ling Tianyu could persist in this space for so long. It turned out that he had a unique skill. But how did he find out about this method? Generally, no one could think of this. Even Lin Yi did not think of catching a monster and taking out its inner core. The inner core of a monster in the gold core stage was not too tempting for Lin Yi. Phew! After killing all the monsters, Ling Tianyu let out a long breath. Then, he sat cross-legged on the scale of the Tai Chi and adjusted his breath, quickly recovering his physical strength and genuine chi. It seemed that he was preparing for the next wave of monsters. After understanding the situation, Lin Yi did not stay any longer and flew in the direction of Ling Tianyu. Who? Ling Tianyu was startled and stared at the direction where Lin Yi flew from with a frightened expression. Unfortunately, he could not see anything in this range. He could only feel that someone or a spirit beast was coming to attack. After all, his divine sense and perception were too far apart from Lin Yi's. But what puzzled Ling Tianyu was that he had almost figured out the interval between the appearance of these monsters. That was why he sat cross-legged and adjusted his breath so calmly. He did not expect that there would be an accident. "It's me. Linny did not frighten Ling Tianyu and said directly, "Brother Lin?" Ling Tianyu was shocked and looked at the darkness in disbelief. He even thought that he was hallucinating after fighting for so long. "You are very skilled in dealing with monsters. How did you find out?" Lin Yi's figure floated over. Only when he landed on the scale of the Tai Shi and turned into a solid body did Ling Tianyu confirm that the person in front of him was really Lin Yi. Brother Lin Yu. Although he was very shocked how Lin Yi came here. How did he find him? And most importantly, how did he move here? It's a long story. Let's make it short. With that, Lin Yi briefly recounted what happened after he separated from Ling Tianyu. Of course, he omitted many details, such as that traitor by Jingza. He only said that Chu Tianlu wanted to repay him by bringing him to this place to find the spiritual knowledge fruit's core. Sure enough, Ling Tianyu could not help but smile bitterly after listening to Lin Yi's words. The spiritual knowledge fruit's core is actually a lie. Many people have seen it, but no one has ever obtained it. Then I'm a ghost. Lin Yi smiled. What? Ling Tianyu was taken aback, not understanding what Lin Yi meant. However, he suddenly remembered that Lin Yi had just floated over, and he suddenly shuddered. Although cultivators were not afraid of ghosts, and the so-called ghosts were actually souls, he still felt a little uncomfortable. Brother Lin Yu. Chapter 54-51. Cough cough. Ling Tianyu was shocked by Lin Yi's words. He stared at the spiritual knowledge fruit's core in Lin Yi's hand, seemingly wanting to see what it was. In his impression, this thing was just a lure. Through the spiritual knowledge fruit's core, one could enter this space. Lin Yi put away the spiritual knowledge fruit's core, because trouble had come again. In the distance there was an awu sound. Obviously, a wave of monsters was coming. Suddenly, Ling Tianyu restored his previous serious expression. He held the silk belt in his hand, and grabbed a handful of flying needles. No need to go through so much trouble. Lin Yi shook his head lightly. Just as Ling Tianyu was puzzled, Lin Yi threw out a pill-fire chi bomb. Boom! An explosion sounded, and all the monsters flying towards them fell into the bottomless darkness. This time, Lin Yi looked carefully. His pill-fire chi bomb was very powerful, so it could blow up a group of monsters. However, Lin Yi wanted to see if it was because of the explosion of one monster that blew up the other monsters. But the result disappointed Lin Yi, because this time, Lin Yi clearly saw that the monsters were killed by his pill-fire chi bomb, not by each other exploding. This was really strange. Using a monster's own Niden to blow up the monsters could cause a chain explosion, but using a pill-fire chi bomb could only kill the extra monsters. It seemed that this Ling Tianyu was not simple. Lin Yi looked at him with admiration, but Ling Tianyu admired Lin Yi even more. He almost prostrated himself in front of Lin Yi. Brother Lin, how did you do it? Ling Tianyu's face was full of shock at the moment. It was hard for him to imagine that Lin Yi could kill a group of monsters with just one move. This was much easier than him. Originally, he had been very proud, thinking that he knew the ultimate move to kill a group of monsters. However, only now did he realize that the gap between him and the strong was insurmountable. Strength could crush everything. In the face of absolute strength, all schemes were useless. What do you think? Lin Yi didn't know how to explain this problem. In fact, Ling Tianyu already knew that Lin Yi was very powerful. He had already seen this in the competition after the primeval trials. Speaking of which, did you come here just to look for me? Not really. I was just looking for the exit, but I didn't find it. Instead, I found you. Lin Yi said. By the way, you said you wanted to go to a place. Is that the big monster here? Is it any use to you? It was no wonder that Lin Yi was puzzled. After watching for a long time, he couldn't figure out how Ling Tianyu's method of fighting monsters could improve his own strength. In Lin Yi's opinion, it was all about technique, but it had nothing to do with surpassing oneself to improve one's strength. It was just like in a game, where you relied on skills to continuously attack some small monsters, but the experience gained was not much. It's useless, but there's no other way. Ling Tianyu sighed and said, with my strength, I can't kill these monsters too quickly. This is already the limit of my speed. Then what are you doing here? Linny couldn't help but feel puzzled after hearing this. Naturally, I'm looking for a legendary item. Ling Tianyu didn't hide it. He brought Linny here with the intention of repaying a debt of gratitude. The reason why he didn't let Linny follow him was because this place was too dangerous. It wasn't that he didn't want to tell Linny. But my movement speed is limited. I calculated that with my speed, after killing the last wave of monsters, I won't have much stamina left. If I rest for a while, I can return to my peak state. Then, after killing the next wave of monsters, I will have some stamina left. I will use the remaining stamina to move forward for a short distance before adjusting my breathing. However, this time I can't return to my peak state. After killing the monsters, I won't have any extra stamina left. I need to rest and return to my peak state again. What do you mean? Linny was confused and didn't understand at all. You can still move. How do you move? Brother Lin, don't you know? Ling Tianyu was also stunned. He looked at Linny with some doubt and said, Of course I move by controlling the Taishi scales under my feet. However, this is very exhausting. I can only move it a little bit at a time. So much so that I regret coming here. I reckon that by the time I reach my destination, I will be exhausted to death. The Taishi scales can move? Linny looked at his feet in shock. This was the first time he heard of such a thing. Of course. Ling Tianyu nodded as if it was a matter of course. How do you move it? Linny was moved and asked quickly. If it could really move, then Xue Jianfeng and Chu Tianlu could come here. By using divine sense. Ling Tianyu said. Brother Lin, you don't know. How could I know? Linny didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This is the first time I've come here. Even the way you fight the monsters is the first time I've seen it. No wonder. I just remembered that I was the one who brought you here. Ling Tianyu nodded in understanding and explained. The Taishi scale under my feet is actually a duckweed floating in the air. It can be controlled by my divine sense. In fact, it's similar to the legendary flying sword, but it's not exactly the same. It's just that my divine sense is too weak, so I can't go far. Show me, Linny suddenly said. Okay. Ling Tianyu closed his eyes without hesitation and began to use his divine sense to control the Taishi scales under his feet. Linny looked at Ling Tianyu carefully and used his divine sense to feel the Taishi scales under his feet. Although it seemed that the Taishi scales were not moving on the surface, Linny could still feel that the Taishi scales were moving. It was really moving. Although the speed was very slow, it was really moving. Okay, you can stop. Linny thought for a while and said. Phew. Ling Tianyu let out a long sigh and wiped the beads of sweat off his forehead. Clearly, he was very tired from doing all this. However, just when Ling Tianyu wanted to sit down cross-legged and adjust his breathing, he almost staggered and fell into the abyss. Because the Taishi scales under his feet moved and moved forward at a very high speed. Ling Tianyu heard the whooshing sound of the wind, which scattered his hair. Even though he was a practitioner of the Foundation establishment realm, he was scared out of his wits. When he came back to his senses, he shouted in shock. Brother Lin, are you controlling it? Of course, Ling Tianyu was also clear that apart from Lin Yi, there was no one else. Chapter 54-52. However, this was also thanks to Lin Yi's powerful divine sense and spiritual power. If it were someone else, it would not be so fast. Gosh, if we keep going at this speed, we will reach our destination very soon. Ling Tianyu instantly became very excited. Brother Lin, don't worry. The things are still yours. Just take me out. I've stayed in this damn place long enough. It's really boring to deal with these monsters all day long. Where to? Linny nodded. Ling Tianyu was a good friend. He never had any greedy thoughts, which made Linny quite admire him. In fact, Ling Tianyu was different from Bing Wuqing. Bing Wuqing was more intimidated, and she was his little brother. He was also different from Chu Tianlu. Although Chu Tianlu was also saved by Lin Yi and then repaid him, he still held back and only revealed his trump card at the last moment. But Ling Tianyu was not like that. It's the direction I was going just now. Just keep flying, Ling Tianyu said. In fact, he had already found the direction, but his speed was too slow. Okay. Linny thought for a while. Bing Wuching could still hold on, so he did not have to hurry back. After all, even if he went back, he could not control two Tai Chi scales at the same time. That would consume too much divine sense and spiritual power. This was not just 2 times the divine sense. For example, if a person were to do 2 things at the same time, it might take him 2 hours to finish one. However, if he were to multitask and do 2 things at the same time, it might not take him 2 hours, and he might even make a mistake. Of course, Linny could also let these people step on the Tai Chi scales one by one, but it would be a little troublesome. Moreover, the destination that Ling Tianyu mentioned had other dangers. If there were, it would be troublesome for Lin Yi to take care of Ling Tianyu alone. If he took the other 2 with him, it would be purely troublesome for him. Next, to Ling Tianyu's surprise, the Tai snake scale flew at a very high speed. In any case, the space here was very vast, and Lin Yi could also sense that there were no obstacles in front of him, so he could just keep flying without any danger. However, after flying for about half an hour, Lin Yi was a little surprised. Tianyu, did you remember wrongly? Our speed isn't low. In the secular world's terms, it's 200 to 300 kilometers per hour. It's comparable to a high-speed train. Why aren't they here yet? Even though this was a 4th-dimensional space, it didn't take long for Lin Yi to find Ling Tianyu from the previous location. Moreover, it wasn't that slow to find him. It should be almost done, right? Ling Tianyu also estimated the distance and frowned. He had never been here before, and had only heard about it from others. Then let's wait and see. Lin Yi nodded and continued to fly forward at a very fast speed. Suddenly, Lin Yi stopped and braked, causing Ling Tianyu to stumble and almost fall. Fortunately, he was a cultivator and was able to stabilize his body in time. Brother Lin Yu, there's someone in front, Lin Yi said faintly. There's someone. Ling Tianyu was stunned and blurted out. How is that possible? Even if there's someone, it's impossible to fly so far. Moreover, Ling Tianyu was very sure that he was the first batch of people to reach the snakehead position in this Tai Snake Island trial. How could someone enter before him? You said before that this isn't the first Tai Snake Island trial, so it's very likely that it's someone left behind from the previous trial. Lin Yi didn't find it strange. This person's strength is higher than yours. Then compared to you, Brother Lin? Ling Tianyu was shocked and asked quickly. Higher than me, Lin Yi said faintly. Ah. Ling Tianyu was shocked after hearing this. He couldn't believe it and couldn't speak. I'm only at the foundation establishment stage, so of course he's higher than me. Lin Yi smiled and said, but in fact his divine sense isn't as strong as mine. In the ancient small world, it was all about divine sense. Here, cultivating divine sense was also the main job of cultivators. After discovering this, Lin Yi's strength suddenly soared. You scared me to death, Brother Lin. Ling Tianyu immediately heaved a sigh of relief. I thought it was higher than you. What kind of expert is that? In Ling Tianyu's view, Lin Yi was almost an undefeatable legend. He didn't feel any pressure when fighting against an opponent at a higher level. Although he didn't know the specific strength of Lin Yi, he felt that he was definitely more powerful than the average foundation establishment stage, or even gold core stage. Who is it? Sure enough, he was an expert. When Lin Yi controlled the Tai snake scale to approach, that person sensed it and shouted, Senior, we are just passing by. We mean no harm. Ling Tianyu heard that this person was full of energy. Although he didn't release his strength, he was obviously not a weakling. He immediately answered respectfully, Passing by? That person obviously didn't believe him. His sharp eyes swept over. Although he couldn't see clearly, it didn't hinder his sharp momentum. You came here and can control the Tai snake scale. You're just passing by? You're not here for the treasure? Ling Tianyu didn't expect that the other party would be so straightforward. Although everyone came for the treasure, he was still not used to it. Boy, I didn't expect you to be so secretive. Since you are here, there is no need to hide anything. However, I am very curious. You are just a foundation establishment stage cultivator. How did you come here? Do you have any secret method to control the tie snake scale? This person was very strange. Of course, this was also because he couldn't see clearly and couldn't sense the existence of Lin Yi. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so strange. When Ling Tianyu was nervous, he subconsciously released his strength, so it was understandable that this person saw through it. Ling Tianyu didn't know what to say. He couldn't help but turn his head to look at Lin Yi, wanting to hear what he had to say. However, Ling Tianyu's silence made that person think that he was timid. He immediately sneered and said, "Boy, I don't care how you came here. Since you met me, it won't be so easy to leave. Tell me the method to control the tie snake scale quickly. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." Ling Tianyu was stunned. He didn't expect that this person would be so overbearing. He didn't want to be polite at the slightest disagreement. Moreover, even if you know how to control the tie snake scale quickly, you can't say it. Of course, I use my divine sense to control it. At this time, Lin Yi suddenly opened his mouth. He sighed slightly. In the small Jianghu of ancient times, the mortals were very practical. He didn't know whether it was because of the atmosphere of this place or something else. Anyway, it was not the same as the Heaven Stage Island. Chapter 54-53. He didn't expect that there was another person by Ling Tianyu's side. But he didn't notice this person at all. Naturally, it's the person you asked. Lin Yi smiled faintly and said, "I use my divine sense to drive it. I'm sure you know. Old thing, tell me what you know about the treasure. Otherwise, don't blame this young man for being impolite." The old man frowned. He was the one who'd said this before. And Lin Yi had changed a few words and thrown it back at him. Of course he was pissed. He was very angry. But he couldn't figure out Lin Yi's strength. Previously, he couldn't sense Lin Yi's existence. Now that Lin Yi had spoken, he still couldn't sense Lin Yi's strength. How strong was this person? Did he have a special concealment ability? Or did he have strength comparable to him? If it was the former, he felt that it was possible. But if it was the latter, it was too unrealistic. He was an expert of the nascent soul stage, and at the peak of the late nascent soul stage. In this small world, he was almost invincible. No one could surpass him. In addition, Lin Yi had called him a young man before. This meant that this person wasn't very old. Otherwise, even if his voice and appearance were young, there were many cultivators who were more than 100 years old. These people would have called themselves old man instead of young man. The most important thing was that Ling Tianyu's tone was trembling when he answered. It was not difficult to understand that they didn't have any experts on their side. If they had experts as their backing, would Ling Tianyu speak in this tone? Thinking of this, the old man calmed down and said indifferently, "Brat, don't try to bluff this old man. Do you think this old man has been here for so many years because of fear? I might as well tell you. These years, this old man has also met some people who coveted the treasure ahead. But do you know what happened to them?" "I don't want to know." Lin Yi shrugged and said indifferently, "Since you caught up to them in front of you, then their strength must be inferior to yours. But we caught up to you behind you, so our strength must be stronger than yours." Ahahaha. The man suddenly laughed maniacally. "This is the funniest joke I've ever heard. Do you know my strength?" "Oh, I know," Lin Yi said lightly. "Isn't it just the peak of Yuanying? Isn't it just peak nascent soul? Do you know that this old man's strength is an existence that stands at the peak of the supreme ancient martial world? No one can surpass this old man. Do you know this old man's name back then?" That person seemed to be angered by Lin Yi's disapproving tone and asked arrogantly, "I don't know. Why don't you tell me?" If it weren't for the fact that Lin Yi wanted to ask more about the treasure, he wouldn't have bothered to waste his breath on this fellow. Even if he didn't do anything to him, he would have quickly overtaken him and ignored him. Of course, this was also because Ling Tianyu didn't know anything. This guy must have read about this treasure from some legend and came looking for it. He didn't know any other useful clues. Back in the day, this old man was known as the undefeated archaic era. That person actually spoke out his own title. Question mark. Lin Yi didn't think there was anything special about it. Instead, he thought of Invincible East and Invincible East. What? You're the undefeated Archaic Era senior? You actually came here? Ling Tianyu's eyes widened, and he shouted in surprise with an incredulous expression. It seems that you as a junior have heard of this old man. The other one is far inferior. He thinks he's infallible. The undefeated Archaic Era was very satisfied with Ling Tianyu's reaction. Although he hadn't appeared in the supreme ancient martial world for hundreds of years, it seemed that many people still knew of his name. That's right, senior. Speaking of which, I'm actually your disciple. Ling Tianyu was already trembling with excitement. But Lenny had a puzzled expression. Why did this kid come here to claim to be a relative? Was this old thing his master? Ling Tianyu wasn't the kind of person who would treat anyone as his mother. Don't try to curry favor with this old man. This old man doesn't have a weak disciple like you. The undefeated Archaic Era seemed to be very disdainful of Ling Tianyu's strength. Coming here to participate in the trial with this kind of strength, should this old man say that you're young and fearless, or that you're stupid and don't know the consequences? Ling Tianyu was speechless for a moment, and his face turned a little red. But at this moment, there was a sudden change. A group of monsters quickly flew over, but this time, they attacked in two directions. One group of monsters attacked the undefeated Archaic Era, and the other group attacked Lenny. Swoosh! A throwing knife tied with a red rope appeared in the undefeated Archaic Era's hand, and he directly killed a monster in the air. It only took a few seconds for the monster to explode. With a few booms, these monsters were blasted into pieces and fell into the abyss. At first glance, this move was exactly the same as Ling Tianyu's Thousand Blades. But if one looked closely, there were some differences, and its power was unknown how many times greater. Ling Tianyu's flying needles could only concentrate on killing one monster, and could not destroy the inner core in their bodies. However, the undefeated Archaic Era could directly use these throwing knives to pierce the inner core and cause a chain of explosions. On the other side, Ling Tianyu also attacked at the same time. He used the same method as before. After killing a monster, took out the inner core, and then detonated it. The undefeated Archaic Era let out a cry of surprise, and finally began to look at Ling Tianyu, who was not far away. Although he couldn't see his appearance, he could still sense the scene just now. After a while, the undefeated Archaic Era suddenly said, "Are you really from the Thousand Blades faction?" "Yes, Martial Uncle. I am Ling Tianyu from the Thousand Blades faction." Ling Tianyu was very excited. Previously, he was still thinking about how to convince the undefeated Archaic Era. But now there was no need to say anything. The display of martial arts was more powerful than anything else. "You came here because you read the sex logs, right?" The undefeated Archaic Era's voice was not as arrogant as before, but as stern as an elder. "Did you peek?" "Senior Martial Uncle, I didn't peek. I am a core disciple of the sect, the eldest senior brother, and I have the right to look at the sex logs." Ling Tianyu hurriedly explained respectfully. "Nonsense." The undefeated Archaic Era's voice suddenly increased 8 times, and he said coldly, "You are a mere disciple in the Foundation establishment stage, and you call yourself the eldest senior brother? When did a nobody like you become the eldest senior brother of the Thousand Blades faction? If you don't tell the truth, don't blame me for being impolite." Chapter 54-54. Bullshit. Primordial Invincible finally cursed. "You call this the Thousand Blades attack? This is the Thousand Blades attack. How can this kind of child's play be considered a unique skill of the Thousand Blades sect?" Ling Tianyu was at a loss for words. He didn't know what to say, and could only smile bitterly. "Senior Martial Granduncle, this is indeed the unique skill of our sect. Thousand Blades shooting at the same time. This kind of martial skill that you use real flying daggers to display is already a legendary existence." "Bullshit. Our Thousand Blades sect is a member of the 4 great sections. How could we have declined so much?" Primeval Invincible roared. "Enough with your nonsense. Tell me, did you steal a move from our Thousand Blades school and slander us? Did you steal it from some other sect? Did you steal it from us? I think you are the enemies of the Thousand Blades sect. No, no, no. Martial uncle, please don't misunderstand. I really am the eldest senior brother of the Thousand Blades sect. If you don't believe me, here is my waist token, please take a look. With that, Ling Tianyu didn't hesitate. He took a token from his waist and threw it to Primordial Invincible. Primeval Invincible snorted coldly as he accepted the medallion. He looked at it carefully, and then his face fell. He looked incredulous, and after a long moment he said, "Are you really the eldest brother of the Thousand Blades school? Why are you so weak?" Ling Tianyu sighed and said helplessly, "Martial uncle, the Thousand Blades sect now is no longer the Thousand Blades sect of your time. After you left, those enemies came and injured the Kuan Saber ancestor and killed the second senior master Long Jia. After that, the sect began to decline." "What did you say? Junior brother Kuan Dao is injured? My disciple Long Jia was killed?" Primordial Invincible's voice immediately changed and became trembling with anger. Who did it?" "It's an expert from the Qiankuan sect. After you left, Immortal Du Nan from the Qiankuan sect dominated the ancient Jianghu. He is an expert at the peak of the late stage of nascent soul realm. After severely wounding our Thousand Blades sect, the Qiankuan sect won the position of the four major sects and clans, replacing us," Ling Tianyu said with a pained expression. "From then on, our Thousand Blades faction never recovered. Most of the disciples left, leaving only us, the core disciples. In the following decades, Immortal Du Nan's strength increased explosively. Now, he is already half a step away from the consummate Yuaning realm." "What? How did he become so strong so quickly?" Primeval Invincible exclaimed. "Yes, Martial Granduncle. Moreover, the Qiankuan sect has become the #1 sect in the remote ancient small Jianghu, because a cultivator at the peak of the late stage of the Yuaning realm has appeared in the Qiankuan sect, whose strength is just below Immortal Du Nan's." Ling Tianyu said honestly. "Sigh." Primeval Invincible heaved a deep sigh, filled with unwillingness and regret. He really didn't expect that the Thousand Blades faction, one of the four major sects and clans in the past, would fall into such dire straits in just 100 years. He didn't consider this. He thought that with him as the stabilizing force, no one would dare to cause trouble for the Thousand Blades faction. However, he still underestimated the ambition of these sects and clans. Perhaps after he left, no one would dare to cause trouble for the Thousand Blades faction for 10 or 20 years. But what about 30 or 50 years? If he was gone, there would naturally be people who coveted the position of the four major sects and clans. The Qiankuan sect was one of the best among them. Moreover, they had a grudge against the Thousand Blades faction. Of course, they would find a way to replace them. This was understandable. "Martial Granduncle, you don't have to worry too much. For the time being, our Thousand Blades faction is not in any trouble. Although the Qiankuan sect is powerful, we are now in decline, and they don't have the intention to continue arguing with us." Ling Tianyu sighed. In fact, being ignored by the opponent was the most unbearable, but he couldn't do anything about it. Ling Tianyu's goal was to revitalize the Thousand Blades faction. He wanted the Thousand Blades faction to flourish in his generation and become a member of the 10 minor sects and clans again. He might even become one of the 4 major sects and clans. Let's go back. Let's go back. Primeval Invincible finally made a decision. "I will find the Qiankuan sect." "Martial Granduncle, aren't you going to find the treasure?" Ling Tianyu was startled. "The treasure is just a legend. It's hard to say whether it really exists or not." Primeval Invincible shook his head. "I have been here for more than 100 years, but I haven't found any clues." When Ling Tianyu heard that, he could not help but fall silent. Indeed, the records about this place were vague. It was unknown whether there were any treasures here. If there were, Invincible Primordial would have found them long ago. Since he hadn't found anything after such a long time, it was probably useless to stay here any longer. "All right, I will listen to Martial Granduncle. How are we going to get out?" Ling Tianyu asked. "I know the exit," Primeval Invincible said. "All right, shall we go now?" Although Ling Tianyu was a little shocked, he still obeyed. "Follow me." Primeval Invincible nodded his head. Brother Lin, what should we do now? At this moment, Ling Tianyu suddenly remembered that Lin Yi was still beside him. He hurriedly asked in embarrassment. You go back. I will take a look. Since he was already here, Lin Yi naturally didn't want to leave so easily. Besides, Bing Wuqing and Chu Tianlu were still behind him. He couldn't just leave them behind. Kid, you aren't from the Thousand Blades faction? Primeval Invincible was not stupid. After listening to the conversation between Ling Tianyu and Lin Yi, he immediately determined that Lin Yi wasn't from the Thousand Blades faction. After all, Ling Tianyu was the eldest senior brother. All the disciples of the Thousand Blades faction would listen to him, and there was no need to discuss it with Lin Yi. No, Tianyu, you go back first. Lin Yi didn't hide it and said directly, Kid, since you have heard so much, don't even think about leaving. Primeval Invincible's attitude towards Ling Tianyu was quite good, but it wasn't the same for Lin Yi. In his opinion, an outsider like Lin Yi wouldn't be able to leave so easily after hearing so much inside information about the decline of the Thousand Blades faction. Lin Yi was indifferent. He didn't care about a nascent soul expert at the exceptional realm. Of course, he wouldn't attack Ling Tianyu, but he didn't say anything. No. Ling Tianyu was shocked and hurriedly said, Martial uncle, I owe Brother Lin a life-saving debt. If it wasn't for Brother Lin, I would have been killed by Xue Jianfeng of the Snow Sword faction during the primeval trial. It was Brother Lin who acted out of righteousness. Therefore, this disciple came here this time to repay Brother Lin by finding that treasure for Brother Lin. Chapter 54-55. Obviously, Immemorial Invincible was not an unreasonable person. Although he still looked down on Lin Yi, he just snorted coldly this time. A small Snow Sword faction actually dared to deal with you. It seems that the Thousand Blades faction has really declined. This old man needs to go back and take a look. As for you, you can do as you please. Since a disciple of my faction is speaking for you, this old man will not make things difficult for you. Don't talk about our faction's matters when you go out. Martial Uncle Master, what this disciple said is not a secret. Everyone in Immemorial Jianghu knows about it. Ling Tianyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He tried to explain to Lin Yi. Brother Lin will be fine even if he hears it. Besides, he won't talk about it. Immemorial Invincible responded non-committally. Then he said to Ling Tianyu. Then Ling Tianyu, come with me. Your friend, I can give you a hint before I leave. Follow my current position to the west, and you should reach the location of the treasure. However, I haven't found it yet. Moreover, I've gone around in circles here. If you have the ability, go and find it. Let's go. After saying that, Immemorial Invincible shook his hand. The red rope that was previously tied to the flying knife suddenly flew out. However, this time there were no flying knives. Instead, it swept towards Ling Tianyu's position. Ling Tianyu was stunned at first. He subconsciously wanted to dodge. Although he found that Immemorial Invincible had no evil intentions, he stood still. Then his body became light. He was brought up by the red rope, and the next moment, he fell on Immemorial Invincible's tie snake scale. Phew! Ling Tianyu knew the gap between his and Martial Uncle Master's martial skills. Immemorial Invincible's was the Real Thousand Blades technique, while his was just a simplified version. Brother Lin, we will meet again. We will meet again. Lin Yi nodded and said lightly. If Ling Tianyu didn't know how to get out, then Lin Yi probably didn't know either. However, Lin Yi didn't ask, and Ling Tianyu didn't mention it. Immemorial Invincible pretended not to know. In fact, he was quite disgusted with Lin Yi. Although this young man was a bit capable, he didn't show any respect to a nascent soul realm old monster like him. Immemorial Invincible didn't care about him. After Ling Tianyu steadied himself, Invincible Ancient controlled the tie snake scale to fly southwest. Naturally, Lin Yi wouldn't forget something as important as this. Invincible Ancient didn't tell him, but couldn't he see for himself? After Immemorial Invincible left for a while, Lin Yi slowly drove the tie snake scale to follow him. With Lin Yi's divine sense, he could cover a much farther distance than Immemorial Invincible. Therefore, when they walked in front, Lin Yi could sense them from far away. From Immemorial Invincible's point of view, Lin Yi didn't follow them. He was sure that Lin Yi would have to spend a lot of effort to find the exit. Even if he had a special ability to control the Tai snake scale quickly, he was still a small junior with limited physical strength. As for why Immemorial Invincible felt that Lin Yi was weak, it was because Ling Tianyu was weak. Birds of a feather flock together. If Lin Yi was strong, would he still hang out with Ling Tianyu? But this was Immemorial Invincible's one-sided view. Lin Yi's principle of making friends had always been character. Character was the most important thing. Strength was secondary. Therefore Lin Yi had a lot of friends. Lin Yi tracked them with his divine sense for about half an hour. When he saw Immemorial Invincible and Ling Tianyu arrive at a place similar to a teleportation array, they disappeared. Only then did Lin Yi turn around and rush in the direction of the treasure. Without other interference, Lin Yi's speed was very fast. He also didn't need to worry about his companions, because he had the jade pendant to warn him. He could avoid unknown dangers at any time. It didn't take long for Lin Yi to return to the place where he'd met Primordial Undefeated. It was dark, but Lin Yi's divine sense told him where he was. Should he head west from here? After finding the right direction, Lin Yi began to move forward slowly. This time, he didn't use a fast speed, because he needed to release his divine sense to sense everything around him and the specific location of the treasure. Lin Yi released his divine sense to the extreme, not wanting to miss any detail. Immemorial Invincible had said that he couldn't find it after going back and forth several times. So at first glance, it seemed that what Lin Yi was doing was useless, but in fact it was not. Although Immemorial Invincible was an expert at the great completion of nascent soul realm, his divine sense was limited. He could control the Tai Chi scales to search in all directions without missing anything. But he couldn't search up and down. The Tai Chi scales couldn't move up and down, but could only move parallel. But Lin Yi's perception was very strong, so he could sense up and down a long distance. This was something that Immemorial Invincible couldn't do. And Lin Yi's focus was on the area above and below. After all, Immemorial Invincible had searched for hundreds of years and still couldn't find it, so the possibility of it being in a parallel direction was not high. It must be a place that he had overlooked. And so, Lin Yi slowly probed his senses, slowly advancing forward. However, when he entered the range of his divine sense, it was still endless darkness. There was nothing special about it. Half an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours. Just when Lin Yi thought that the legend of the treasure was fake, his expression suddenly changed. The Tai Chi scales under his feet also stopped moving. There was something. It was right under Lin Yi's feet, in the 10 o'clock direction. Of course, it was impossible for Immemorial Invincible's perception to sense it, because the range was a little far. Even Lin Yi could barely find it. The Tai Chi scales couldn't fly up and down, so Lin Yi could only give up on the Tai Chi scales. He turned into his primordial body and slowly flew down. Perhaps only Lin Yi could do this. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't have such a powerful divine sense. The scene that entered Lin Yi's eyes shocked him. This was not a treasure, but a pitch-black hole. It was like a cosmic black hole. He couldn't see what was inside, and it was full of unknowns. Or more accurately, this was a teleportation array, where it could be teleported, whether there would be danger after teleportation, and whether it could be teleported out were all unknown. Seeing this, Lin Yi couldn't help but hesitate. He didn't go in rashly. After all, this kind of thing was full of unpredictability. No one knew what would happen after entering. At the entrance of the black hole, Lin Yi hesitated for a moment. Then he tried to approach it. However, just as he approached the black hole, the jade pendant sent a strong warning. There was danger inside. The jade pendant wouldn't lie. The fact that it had such a strong warning meant that there was a risk that even Lin Yi might not be able to handle. Chapter 54-56. Although there might be treasures inside, Lin Yi didn't want to take the risk. Firstly, his main body wasn't here, and his strength wasn't too high. Secondly, Bing Wuqing and Chu Tianlu were waiting for him behind. If he went in, He might not be able to come out for a long time. What would happen to those two then? With their strength, they would probably be trapped here until they died. So, even if Lin Yi wanted to go, he would do it on his own next time. He couldn't do it this time. It would be best to bring the main body of the heavenly island here. That way it would be safer. Thinking of this, Lin Yi flew back onto the tie snake's scale again and controlled it to fly backward quickly. This time, Lin Yi used his full speed, so it only took him less than 2 hours to return to the previous place. At this time, Bing Wuqing and Chu Tianlu were fighting monsters with great effort. Suddenly, they felt something flying toward them from behind and were shocked. The two looked back at the same time, but they couldn't see anything in the darkness. "Brother Bing, is this some big monster or monster king?" Chu Tianlu asked in shock. The time spent fighting monsters had already made him complain incessantly. His strength was low to begin with, and even if Bing Wuqing used her full strength, she couldn't take care of everything. He could only protect himself. "No, it's Big Brother." Bing Wuqing's perception was stronger than Chu Tianlu's. When Chu Tianlu asked the question, she had already identified the identity of the newcomer. It was Lin Yi, who had returned. "Ah, it's Brother Lin." Chu Tianlu's voice became unusually excited. "That's right, it's me." As Lin Yi spoke, he had already arrived beside the two of them. With a vital energy core fire bomb, he blew up the monsters around him, then said to the two of them, "Come, there's limited space for you two to stand, so each carry one of them." "Aha!" The two of them were a little shocked, because this time, Lin Yi didn't fly back on his own, but stepped on the tie snake's scale. Did that mean that he had already mastered the way to control the tie snake's scale? All right. Without another word, Bing Wuqing leaped onto Lin Yi's Taishi scale and said, "I'll carry him." "Brother Lin, can't we control the tie snake scales ourselves?" Chu Tianlu asked a little curiously. "If that's the case, we don't have to hold it." He always felt that it was strange for two grown men to hug each other. Of course, it was not because he wanted to steal something. If boss says we can't, then we naturally can't. Bing Wuqing said coldly. If it wasn't for the fact that Lin Yi still thought highly of Chu Tianlu, she would have ignored him long ago and left him to fend for himself. Chu Tianlu immediately felt somewhat awkward. Controlling this requires spiritual consciousness and mental strength. You can try it, but your spiritual consciousness is limited, Lin Yi casually explained. If that's the case, I understand. Chu Tianlu jumped over embarrassedly and landed on Bing Wuqing's body with an awkward expression on his face. However, Bing Wuqing was still expressionless, as if she was hugging something instead of a person. She only said to Lin Yi, "Boss, can we get out from here? What exactly is this place?" "I'm not sure about the specifics, but I met Ling Tianyu. He told me how to control it, and he left first. I came back to pick you up." Lin Yi did not tell her about the invincible immemorial realm and the treasures, because there was no need to. "Thank you, boss." Bing Wuqing was very touched. Lin Yi could have left, but he came back to pick her up. She would not suffer any losses in the future if she followed such a boss. Although Chu Tianlu was also touched, he did not dare to speak carelessly. If he said something wrong, he would be mocked by Bing Wuqing again. If she was unhappy and threw him off, he would be doomed. Lin Yi nodded and began to control the tie snake's scales. Although there were two more people, it did not make a big difference to Lin Yi. It was just that his speed was slightly slower. Of course, it was also because Lin Yi was worried that his speed would be too fast, and he would throw them off. Especially Chu Tianlu, half of his body was suspended in the air. Because his speed had decreased, he met the two idiots, Bai Jingze and Chu Tianliang, on the way. The two were sweating profusely. Obviously they were exhausted. Previously, the two could barely maintain their speed with their skills, but now they were struggling. When they saw Lin Yi flying over from afar, they immediately turned pale with fright. "You, how can you fly with people?" Bai Jingze exclaimed. "Oh, I lied to you before." Lin Yi smiled. "You." Bai Jingze's mind was filled with curses, but he did not dare to scold Lin Yi. He could only beg, "Lin Yi, please take us away. We will definitely repay you after we get out. Right, Tianliang?" This time he had learned to be smart. He knew to bring Chu Tianliang with him when talking and doing things. If Linny did not agree, he would have a way out. He would not be as passive as before. That's right. Chu Tianliang could not hold on any longer. Previously, he did not beg Lin Yi because he felt that there was no possibility of reconciliation between the two of them. However, now that he saw Chu Tianlu, he immediately softened. Tianlu, we are all members of the Chu family. You won't just watch me stay here and do nothing, right? Chu Tianlu's heart was undoubtedly good, but he could not make the decision at the moment. He could not help but look at Lin Yi. Did you ask the wrong person? Lin Yi said indifferently. Right, Tianlu. You only need to tell me how to control this Tai snake scale. Chu Tianliang knew that Lin Yi could not help him, so he could only settle for the next best thing. Oh, do you think that if he knew how to control it, he would still need to be carried? Lin Yi looked at Chu Tianliang mockingly. Chu Tianliang was instantly speechless. Bye-bye, we will meet again. Lin Yi waved his hand and controlled the Tai snake scale to leave. Fuck. I'll teach you a lesson sooner or later. Chu Tianliang spat hatefully. Tianliang, what does bye-bye mean? Bai Jingza had a strange expression. Is he calling me? Who knows? It's probably a nickname he gave you. Chu Tianliang shook his head and said, No, if they can do it, so can we. I have to study how to control this thing. Without a doubt, Chu Tianliang's intelligence was not low. He was a person who was good at discovering and researching. He immediately began to study the Tai snake scale. Chu Tianlu watched Chu Tianliang stay here, and could not help but sigh slightly. Although he did not want this result, it was the best result. Would Chu Tianliang stop opposing him after he returned? Obviously not. However, if he left them here in the future, there would be no future. Chapter 54-57. Brother Lin, I know. Chu Tianlu nodded. I will pay attention in the future. Lin Yi didn't say anything more. It was hard to change a person's character. Although Chu Tianlu said so, it was hard to say whether he would do it in the future. They came to the transmission array that Primordial Invincible had used before. Lin Yi went through it directly with the two of them. A white light flashed in front of them, and it was no different from the transmission array that they had passed several times before. In the next moment, the three of them appeared in a patch of grass. Chu Tianlu immediately let out a cheer. This was clearly the Tai Snake Island from before. The feeling of being able to see the light of day again, after emerging from the void of the fourth dimension, was truly great. It feels like a lifetime has passed. Bing Wuqing, who had always been a man of few words, couldn't help but sigh at this moment. The first thing Lin Yi did after coming out was not to sigh, but to search around to see if Ling Tianyu was still nearby. Unfortunately, Lin Yi couldn't find him within the range of his divine senses. Ling Tianyu must have gone back with Primordial Invincible and gone to seek revenge on Qiankuan's sect. How could an expert in the great perfection of nascent soul realm tolerate such hatred that almost destroyed his sect? He was an existence that stood at the top of the small Jianghu in the ancient times. Let's go back. Lin Yi had no nostalgia for this place. Although he wanted to explore what was in that black hole, his current strength was far from enough. He could only leave first. Okay. Bing Wuqing and Chu Tianlu followed Lin Yi, one on the left and one on the right. The three of them walked in the direction of the exit transmission array. As for how to go, Chu Tianlu would naturally lead the way, so Lin Yi didn't have to look for him. Oh, isn't this a local tycoon? A voice came from not far away and fell into the ears of the three. Lin Yi turned his head indifferently and found that it was Wei Dao. This person had ridiculed Ling Tianyu when he entered, and now he suddenly jumped out again. However, what puzzled Lin Yi was, since he knew that Bing Wuqing was a nascent soul realm old weirdo, who gave him the courage to put on airs here. The term nouveau riche was most likely learned from those disciples who had gone to the secular world to gain experience. From this point, it could be seen that this person wasn't a good person. He specialized in such terms. What's the matter? Bing Wuqing asked dispassionately. This made Lin Yi even more puzzled. Logically speaking, Bing Wuqing was the type of person who would attack at the slightest disagreement. Yet, She still had the patience to ask questions at this moment. There must be something fishy about this. Nothing. Why don't I see Ling Ti on you? You wouldn't have died here, right? Although Wei Yidao was acting tough, he didn't dare to really target Bing Wuqing. Instead, he only targeted Ling Ti on you. Are you alright? Bing Wuqing frowned, a chilly aura emanating from her body. Hey, what are you so excited about? Wei Yidao shrugged his shoulders and said, You still dare to hit me? Boring, I'm leaving. As he spoke, he turned around and quickly left with Elder Lin Zhen. You seem to be afraid of this guy? After Wei Yidao left, Lin Yi asked playfully. I wouldn't say I'm afraid, but I'm a little afraid. Bing Wuqing didn't hide anything and shook her head. That's right. Not only Brother Bing, but I'm also very afraid. Chu Tianlu nodded and said, Although the Tyrant's Blade School isn't very powerful, and can't even be considered as one of the 10 small sects, they have an awesome backer. Backer? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. The backer of the Tyrant's Blade School is the Qingquan School, one of the 4 big sects. Chu Tianlu said. It's also because of this reason that although the Tyrant's Blade School is overbearing, no one dares to really offend them. Usually people give in to them. Who asked them to be so awesome? The daughter of the Tyrant's Blade School's leader is married to immortal Du Nan of the Qingquan School as a concubine. So that's what happened. After listening, Lin Yi could more or less understand why the Tyrant's Blade School and the Thousand Blades School had a grudge against each other. It was probably instigated by the Qingquan School. With the Qingquan School's imposing manner, it was really despicable for them to go against the small Thousand Blades School. However, they didn't have to worry so much about letting the Tyrant's Blade School do it for them. It seemed that Bing Wuqing wasn't someone who didn't know how to be patient. This made Lin Yi look up to her. Sometimes, taking a step back wasn't a sign of weakness, but it was for the sake of the overall situation. This Qingquan School is the hidden leader of the small Jianghu in the Archean era. Chu Tianlu continued to explain. It can be said that those who submit to us will prosper, and those who oppose us will perish. Therefore, as long as it's related to them, we rarely get involved. Lin Yi nodded. In fact, this was the same everywhere. Take the North Island for example. The Soaring Sky Pavilion was also such an existence. Of course, that was before Lin Yi appeared. Of course, the Archean Invincible wasn't Lin Yi, so Lin Yi didn't have high hopes for the Archean Invincible. The Qingquan School had 2 top-notch nascent soul experts now, while he was alone. The possibility of him winning was next to nothing. However, these Jianghu grudges weren't something that Lin Yi could worry about. It was impossible for the Archean Invincible to give up, just because he said that the Archean Invincible wasn't a match for them. After all, the Qingquan School and the Thousand Blades School were mortal enemies. There was no possibility of reconciliation between the two. They returned to the transportation matrix without any incidents. Lin Yi guarded the back, and Bing Wuqing took the lead. The 3 of them walked out of the transportation matrix in a single file. They saw Marquis Yu standing not far away. When he saw Lin Yi and the other 2 come out, he just nodded indifferently. Butler Yu. As a junior, Chu Tianlu naturally greeted Marquis Yu. However, as a nascent soul expert, Bing Wuqing didn't need to do so, and Lin Yi didn't need to do so either. How was the harvest? Marquis Yu saw that Chu Tianlu was still polite, so he casually brushed him off. Not bad, Chu Tianlu answered respectfully. Oh, Marquis Yu actually didn't expect Chu Tianlu to have any harvest. He was just being polite. Who would have thought that Chu Tianlu would say that it was not bad? He lifted his eyelids slightly and said with some confusion, Tell me about it? Yes. Chu Tianlu didn't dare to hide anything. He said carefully, We were lucky to get a consciousness fruit. Of course, this is secondary. We found the heart of the consciousness fruit. Lin Yi shook his head secretly. This Chu Tianlu was really simple-minded. If it wasn't for the fact that Lin Yi knew that this fellow was a good person with overflowing sympathy, and didn't have any intention of harming others or guarding against others, he would have thought that Chu Tianlu did it on purpose. It was best not to talk about this kind of thing. An innocent man would get into trouble because of his wealth. It was better to keep a low profile if he had a treasure on him to avoid unnecessary trouble. Chapter 54-58. In his opinion, since Marquis Yu held this Thai Snake Island trial, it must be for everyone to take whatever they want. Otherwise, wouldn't he lose his credibility? Who would come to participate in his trial in the future? Moreover, there were no outsiders in the surroundings, so Chu Tianlu would speak the truth regardless of his feelings or reason, not hiding anything. What? Spiritual awareness fruit's core? When Marquis Yu heard about the spiritual awareness fruit, his eyelids only twitched. There was not much change in his expression, but when he heard about the spiritual awareness fruit's core, his expression suddenly became shocked. He raised his head and asked anxiously, "Yes, it's..." Chu Tianlu wanted to continue speaking, but he was interrupted by Lin Yi. "Well, I still have business to do. Don't disturb Steward Yu," Lin Yi said indifferently to Chu Tianlu. Chu Tianlu realized that he had said too much. Although the spiritual awareness fruit and the spiritual awareness fruit's core were obtained under his witness, in the end, they were Lin Yi's things. What would happen if he said it out? Chu Tianlu said so much out of respect for Marquis Yu, but at this moment he suddenly sobered up and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Steward Yu will go first." Wait. However, Marquis Yu's expression suddenly changed, becoming terrifyingly gloomy. His eyes were like an eagle's as he stared fixedly at Chu Tianlu, saying word by word, "Speak clearly. What is the heart of the fruit of consciousness?" Chu Tianlu shuddered. He never thought that Marquis Yu would suddenly become so irritable. At that moment, he did not dare to continue speaking, and only said vaguely, "I was just joking." Lin Yi sighed inwardly when he heard this. No wonder Chu Tianlu was almost tricked to death by Chu Tianliang, and was played like an idiot by his two brothers. It seemed that he was a person with low EQ. For Marquis Yu's question, Chu Tianlu only needed to make up a story about the heart of the spiritual knowledge fruit, and he would be able to get away with it. For example, the fake spiritual knowledge fruit that could move. All of these could be said casually, but Chu Tianlu chose the most unskilled lie, which no one could believe. As expected, Marquis Yu coldly blocked Chu Tianlu's path and said, "Tell me, what does the divine knowledge fruit's heart look like? Where did you obtain it?" Chu Tianlu stammered. He did not know what to say. He lowered his head apologetically. His heart was filled with guilt towards Lin Yi. He should not have trusted Marquis Yu. "I'm puzzled. What he obtained in Tai Shi Island is his own fortune. What does it have to do with you?" Bing Wuqing could not help but speak up at this moment. She had tolerated Wei Dao because of his background, but it did not mean that she was patient with everyone. For example, this Marquis Yu in front of her made Bing Wuqing very unhappy. "You opened your door to do business and advertised the trial on Tai Shi Island. He handed over the spiritual jades and obtained the quota, but you kept asking him what he obtained. This has nothing to do with you. Don't interfere." Marquis Yu ignored Bing Wuqing and replied coldly. He did not even look at her. "What did you say?" Bing Wuqing's aura suddenly changed, and the strength of an early nascent soul stage expert was fully displayed. "Don't look for trouble." Marquis Yu did not seem to feel the aura released from Bing Wuqing. He still had the same indifferent expression, as if this had nothing to do with him. "You're courting death." Bing Wuqing was instantly enraged. She put her hands together and activated her mental cultivation method. Merciless ice aura was about to be released. Only then did Marquis Yu move. He raised his right hand lightly and his aura changed, revealing his strength. He was actually a nascent soul stage expert. Chu Tianlu was so frightened by the aura of these two that his legs turned to jelly, especially Marquis Yu in front of him. He was actually a top-notch existence in the immemorial underworld. Before this, why did he not know about this at all? After all, Bing Wuqing was someone who followed Lin Yi. Although the opponent was strong, he was not the least bit afraid, and continued to face him coldly. Although his heart was also beating like a drum, he could not embarrass Lin Yi. He firmly believed that this person could not withstand a single blow from Lin Yi. Lin Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. He had long felt that there was something wrong with this Marquis Yu, but he did not expect him to be a nascent soul stage expert. Lin Yi realized that his golden finger, which could see through other people's strength, was not very useful when he was in his primordial spirit state. Perhaps it was still limited by the strength in his physical state. The golden finger relied on the strength of the foundation building stage, so it could not see through experts who were much stronger than him. However, this was not important. He was just a nascent soul stage expert, that was all. Lin Yi's divine sense suddenly spread out and directly took over the pressure on Bing Wuqing. He looked at Marquis Yu and said, "We don't want to cause trouble, but don't force us. You are open for business, so what do we get? Does it have anything to do with you?" Seeing that Lin Yi could actually withstand the pressure of his nascent soul stage expert and share Bing Wuqing's burden, Marquis Yu was extremely shocked. Previously, he did not take Lin Yi seriously at all. In his opinion, Lin Yi was an existence of the same level as Ling Tianyu and Chu Tianlu. Therefore, among the three of them, the one he feared the most was Bing Wuqing. However, he did not expect that there would be a hidden expert here. Although he did not know Lin Yi's strength, in his opinion, Lin Yi should also be a nascent soul expert. However, he should not be particularly strong. After all, he only helped Bing Wuqing to share a part of the pressure and did not counterattack. This meant that the combined strength of Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing would not be able to contend against him. Even so, he did not want to fight head-on with Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing. Although he was a top-notch existence in the small immemorial underworld, at the end of the day, fighting against two early nascent soul experts at the same time was still very stressful. Both sides might be injured. Therefore, it was better to use words to solve the problem. Negotiation was the way to go. "I can accept other things, but not the heart of the fruit of consciousness," Marquis Yu said. "Why?" Lin Yi laughed. "I am really curious. What rule did you set that the heart of the fruit of consciousness cannot be taken? Or did you change it at the last minute?" "No, the heart of the fruit of consciousness is the source of the consciousness fruits on Tai Snake Island. If you take away the heart of the fruit of consciousness, there will no longer be any consciousness fruits produced here, and no one will come to participate in the trial." Marquis Yu explained the reason very seriously. Lin Yi understood. So that was the case. However, understanding was one thing. Although he sympathized with Marquis Yu, and there would be no business on Tai Snake Island in the future, Lin Yi did not intend to give up just like that. Chapter 54-59. If he returned the fruit of consciousness's heart, what would happen to Lin Yi? "I'm sorry, but even so, I can't return the fruit of consciousness's heart to you." Lin Yi spoke, but he was not too forceful. "Your rules didn't say that we can't take the fruit of consciousness's heart, and we spent a lot of money to come in. Don't you think your request is a bit too much?" "I didn't think anyone could get it," Marquis Yu said honestly. Marquis Yu spoke the truth. "That is almost impossible to accomplish. I don't know what method you guys used, but I definitely won't let you guys take it away. Otherwise, it would be my dereliction of duty. The island master won't let me off either. So everyone's sorry. I will pay you back in full this time, but please return the fruit of consciousness's heart." "I'm sorry, that's impossible." Lin Yi did not lack spiritual jades at all. How could returning it be more important than the fruit of consciousness's heart? Moreover, Lin Yi almost entered the fourth dimensional space for the fruit of consciousness's heart. It was a risk, and it was not worth it to return it just like that. "Don't force me." Marquis Yu was obviously angry. Lin Yi's attitude made him unhappy. "Do you know who you're talking to? Do you really plan to become enemies with Tai Snake Island?" "I don't have the habit of making enemies everywhere, but since you want to, I can only accept it." Lin Yi shook his head helplessly. "Tell me, what should we do?" "Very well." Marquis Yu's aura suddenly soared. Bing Wuqing's expression tightened, and she prepared for battle. Chu Tianlu was already pale with fear. He sat at the side, trembling all over. He even forgot to use his vital energy to defend himself. Of course, he could not defend himself even if he wanted to. The difference in strength between him and the person fighting was too great. "Oh, very well." Lin Yi nodded. "You want to fight? What do you think?" Marquis Yu's expression was ferocious. His hands moved, and his sleeves suddenly flung open. Like two poisonous snakes, they entangled towards Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing. Lin Yi did not know whether to call him arrogant or confident. 1 against 2. Helplessly shaking his head, Lin Yi also moved. In the next moment, Marquis Yu, who was previously in a frenzy of rage, fell stiffly onto the ground with a thud. Without any warning, he was like a corpse that had lost its soul. Bing Wuqing's breathing tightened. Although she had already witnessed Lin Yi's prowess, her current opponent was a consummate nascent soul cultivator. She was still thoroughly shocked. The battle was over just like that? Bing Wuqing found it a little funny. She didn't even know how to describe her boss's ruthlessness. Chu Tianlu was dumbstruck as he watched from the side. What was going on? Why did that expert at the peak of the late-stage nascent soul realm kneel before the fight even started? Wasn't this too strange? He rubbed his eyes to see if he was dreaming. Unfortunately, Marquis was still lying on the ground without any movement. Bing Wuqing sneered and scolded. How dare you yell at Big Boss with your meager skills? Are you trying to act all high and mighty? Are you hurt? Lin Yi was a little speechless, but he had no time to care about Bing Wuqing's antics. He had more important things to do. Essentially, he didn't want to hurt Marquis Yu. After all, it was meaningless to become enemies with Tai Snake Island. What the other party said made sense. Anyone else would have risked their lives for the heart of the fruit of consciousness. From two different standpoints, it was hard to say who was right and who was wrong. How is it? Not bad, right? Lin Yi suddenly asked as he looked at Marquis Yu's primordial spirit, who was at a loss in the dark space. Marquis Yu was about to attack Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing when he suddenly felt his primordial spirit being forcibly stripped away by something. In an instant he arrived in a dark space. The area of this dark space was limited, and it was sealed in all directions. No matter what he did, he couldn't get out. In an instant, despair filled his entire being. In fact, if it was the Lin Yi before he entered Tai Snake Island, it would have been difficult to lure Marquis Yu's primordial spirit out so easily. Firstly, Marquis Yu was an expert in the nascent soul realm great perfection, and his strength was obvious. Secondly, Marquis Yu was not defenseless. He was already prepared for battle. Under such circumstances, it was even more difficult to succeed. However, Lin Yi did it with ease and joy. This was all thanks to the fusion with the primordial spirit of the sky-devouring giant crocodile. That guy was originally a nascent soul realm great perfection. After the fusion with Lin Yi, the power of Lin Yi's primordial spirit instantly skyrocketed. Although there were some flaws, as long as Marquis Yu's primordial spirit was not devoured, and he merely captured it into the jade pendant, there was no problem. You, how did you do it? Where is this? What magic treasure do you have? Marquis Yu was about to collapse. Suddenly, he heard Lin Yi's voice and asked loudly, No, this is a new type of martial technique. You just haven't heard of it. Lin Yi's voice was very cold. If you stay here for too long, your physical body will die, and you will slowly dissipate due to the lack of consciousness. In simple words, you will be trapped to death by me sooner or later. Marquis Yu wanted to ask Lin Yi to let him go, but after thinking about it, it was impossible. Why would he let him go? With this kind of ability, wouldn't he be able to do whatever he wanted to him? There was no need to say anything like, you just wait and see, because he couldn't get out at all. I can let you go, but don't cause trouble again. Otherwise, I won't be so easy to talk to next time. Lin Yi seemed to know what Marquis Yu was thinking and said directly, Okay. Marquis Yu gritted his teeth. Although he didn't want to give up the fruit of consciousness's core, in order to live, he could only give in. After all, in front of a real top expert, he had no way of bargaining at all. I hope you don't seek your own death when you come out. After Lin Yi said this, he let Marquis Yu's primordial spirit back. Marquis Yu's body suddenly moved. Bing Wuqing was shocked and quickly prepared for battle. However, Lin Yi waved his hand and stopped her. It's okay, don't worry about him. He won't dare to act like an egg anymore. Marquis Yu was speechless when he heard Lin Yi's words. He thought to himself, when did I act like an egg? Previously I thought I had you all. Who knew you were so powerful? Who? Marquis Yu rested on the ground for a long time, before he stabilized his primordial spirit. He stood up carefully, and looked at Lin Yi with vigilance and respect. This, senior. If there's nothing else, we're leaving. Lenny was too lazy to say more and said directly, "Wait a minute." Marquis panicked and shouted. Chapter 5460. No, Senior. That consciousness fruit's heart is really important to us, you see, Marquis said carefully. Lenny was angered by Marquis's words. You still want to take back the consciousness fruit's heart? Are you really not afraid of death? No, Senior, you've misunderstood. What I mean is, can we exchange? I have enough sincerity on my side. I can bring you to see the island master. Marquis said quickly. Bring me to see the island master, and let the island master deal with me? Lenny narrowed his eyes. Are you sure your island master is my opponent? Won't he be killed by me? Senior, you misunderstood me. I don't mean that. I just want to exchange something. Marquis explained with a bitter smile. All right, if that's the case, then let your island master come over. Why do I have to see him? My time is limited, and my patience is limited. Hurry and contact him. Lenny waved his hand. Actually, Lenny also wanted to see what kind of person this mysterious Thai Snake Island master was. His current modified soul-reaping hand rarely had an opponent. Our island master. Sigh, how do I say this? Marquis's expression became a little awkward. He's a little special and can't come here. So please forgive me, Senior, can you come? Lenny was instantly amused. He wants to see me and wants me to go? What if it's a trap? What wishful thinking is that? Senior, I can guarantee that we are absolutely sincere. I have just communicated with the island master, and he is also very happy to meet you. You can have an equal negotiation, and see if you can use our other good things to exchange for the spiritual knowledge fruit's core in your hands. If you can't, then we will not force you. Oh. Lenny looked at Marquis in surprise. When did he communicate with the island master? Could it be that he had the island master's divine sense mark on him? The two of them could communicate through divine sense? That should be the case. Then Lenny was even more interested in this mysterious island master. This method was good, even better than Lin Yi's chi transmission. Lenny wanted to learn, but on the surface, he still pretended to be very unhappy. Is that so? What's the strength of your island lord? Forgive me for being blunt, but I'm not too sure either. I only know that island master's abilities are much higher than mine. Marquis said with a bitter smile. At this moment, some disciples from other sects came out from the teleportation formation. When they saw Marquis and Lenny talking at the side, they didn't disturb them. After all, they knew Bing Wuching's strength. Lenny saw that there were more people, so he didn't say anything more. He nodded and said, All right, you lead the way. Wuching, you and Heavenly Road go back first. After saying that, Lenny used Zhen Qi to send a sound transmission and set up a meeting place with the two of them. His goal was to not let this Marquis hear him. It didn't matter to Lin Yi to meet the island master. No matter how strong the island master was, Lin Yi was confident that escaping would not be a problem. However, Bing Wuching and Chu Tianlu would not be able to do so. It would be better for them to leave first, in case Lin Yi couldn't take care of them when the time came. All right, Bing Wuching didn't say anything more. She didn't even ask a single question, and directly pulled Chu Tianlu away. This kind of follower was really worry-free. Lin Yi felt that this kind of character wasn't bad. Lead the way. After Bing Wuching and Chu Tianlu had left, Lin Yi said to Marquis, All right, Senior, this way please. Marquis made a gesture of invitation. He didn't stop Bing Wuching and Chu Tianlu from leaving at all. It was obvious that he didn't want to make things difficult for them. At this moment, Marquis was already certain that Lin Yi was the backbone of the three of them. The heart of the fruit of consciousness must be with Lin Yi. Lin Yi followed Marquis and walked forward at a steady pace on the small path of Tai Snake Island. In the blink of an eye, they came to an uninhabited area. It was obvious that there was a teleportation formation here, similar to the one used to go to the trials. It's here. Marquis pointed at the teleportation formation and said, After we pass through this teleportation formation, we will be able to see the master of Tai Snake Island. Lin Yi shrugged. He wasn't afraid of Marquis's little tricks. because Lin Yi could kill him at any time, and then return to the heavenly stage island in his primordial spirit state. Marquis Yu took out some spiritual jades from the bag he carried with him, and placed them into a device that looked like a small sacrificial altar beside the teleportation formation. Then, there was a flash of white light, and it was obvious that the teleportation formation had been activated. "Please, Senior," Marquis Yu said. Lin Yi nodded and walked in first. Marquis Yu admired his courage and boldness. He followed closely behind and entered the teleportation formation. What entered Lin Yi's eyes was a narrow path. It was dim, and it seemed to be the underground cave of Tai Snake Island. Lin Yi saw that Marquis Yu had arrived, so he said, "How do we go?" "I will lead the way for Senior." Marquis Yu walked in front and began to lead the way. This path was not only narrow, but there were also many forks in the road. Marquis Yu walked in front skillfully, but Lin Yi could smoothly remember the path that he had walked through once. Even if he came out by himself, it would not be a problem. On both sides of the path, there was a faint light. It was unknown what the light was, but although it was dim, they could clearly see the road under their feet. The two of them walked forward, and finally arrived in front of a door. Marquis Yu went forward, and made a few gestures in front of the door. From Lin Yi's point of view, each of his gestures contained spiritual energy, and the strength of the spiritual energy was not the same. It should be similar to a type of password to unlock a lock. Lin Yi also memorized each and every one of them in his heart. What he was best at was imitation. "Please come in." After Marquis Yu entered the password gesture, he said to Lin Yi. At this time, the door was still closed. Lin Yi raised his eyebrows, and the next moment, the door slowly opened. A ray of dazzling light came from inside. The visibility here was obviously much greater than outside. Of course, Marquis Yu was already used to it. He waited for Lin Yi to walk in, then followed behind him. This was a large hall, and the light came from the glowing stones around the large hall. In other words, this place was still not connected to the outside world, and should still be under Tai Snake Island. The large hall was very spacious. Other than the glowing stones on the stone pillars around it, there was nothing else. In the middle of the large hall, there was an especially large high platform, and on the high platform, there was actually a primordial spirit. Lin Yi was very surprised. He did not expect to see a primordial spirit here. Could it be that the master of Tai Snake Island, that Marquis Yu mentioned, was this primordial spirit in front of him? Chapter 5461. Marquis Yu ignored Lin Yi's suspicious gaze. He bowed and walked forward quickly. He bowed respectfully to the primordial spirit on the high platform and said, "Island Lord, the person is here." Lin Yi saw this scene, and was secretly surprised. He thought that Marquis Yu's master would be a human cultivator, who was stronger than him, who knew that it was a primordial spirit. However, for Marquis Yu, a top expert at the great perfection of the nascent soul realm, to be so respectful, the primordial spirit on the high platform was definitely not simple. Just as Marquis Yu finished speaking, the primordial spirit spoke. "Hello, human boy. After so many years, you are one of the few humans I have met. How is it? Are you excited and proud?" Lin Yi was instantly speechless. Why was this primordial spirit so narcissistic? Did he not understand the situation? He was the one who begged him to see him. How did it become him being happy and proud to see him? You took the heart of the fruit of consciousness. The primordial spirit on the high platform did not wait for Lin Yi to speak, and continued to ask coldly. Lin Yi frowned and said faintly, "That's right. I heard from this junior with the surname Yu, that you want to make a deal with me. Hand over the heart of the fruit of consciousness, and I will let you live." The primordial spirit on the high platform did not even bother with Lin Yi's question. Instead, he used a condescending and arrogant tone to order. It was as if Lin Yi was just an insignificant ant in his eyes. It was already a great gift for him to be able to speak to Lin Yi. "Oh, so this is your so-called deal?" Lin Yi narrowed his eyes slightly. He did not get angry, but smiled instead, and looked at Marquis Yu with a playful look. Marquis Yu's body trembled slightly. He had a deep understanding of Lin Yi's terror. Although the master on the high platform was also a powerful existence in his eyes, he did not have much confidence against the strange Lin Yi. Island Lord just now. Shut up, useless thing. Just as Marquis Yu opened his mouth, he was interrupted by the primordial spirit. Being called a junior by a weak human, don't you think it's embarrassing? Marquis Yu shrunk his head. A strong cultivator of the nascent soul realm, who was at the perfected nascent soul realm, suddenly kept quiet out of fear. He could only look at Lin Yi awkwardly. Heh. Lin Yi shrugged his shoulders and said, since you don't have any sincerity in the transaction, then let's forget about it. Bye. At this point, Lin Yi could already tell that Marquis Yu had sincerely wanted to trade with him previously. However, he could not even speak in front of this primordial spirit. Haha, you want to leave? In my territory, how can I allow you to leave as you please? The primordial spirit on the high platform snorted lightly, and a formless divine sense vortex instantly surged in the spacious hall. Although Lin Yi had already expected it, he was still a little surprised to really feel the strength of this primordial spirit. Wasn't it said that in the immemorial small Jianghu, the highest strength was only at the perfected nascent soul realm? Why was there a primordial spirit at the perfected nascent soul realm? However, the strength of Lin Yi's divine sense had already reached the perfected nascent soul realm long ago. Moreover, recently, he had more methods to use his primordial spirit. This primordial spirit at the perfected nascent soul realm was really not a threat to him. I am not a person who likes to kill. I will give you one last chance. Use your life to exchange for the heart of the fruit of consciousness. To trade or not to trade, quickly decide. The primordial spirit seemed to be determined. How arrogant. Lin Yi laughed and said, a primordial spirit at the perfected nascent soul realm should be the top existence in the immemorial small Jianghu. No wonder you are so arrogant. You have some eyesight. You can actually see that I am at the perfected nascent soul realm. You know quite a bit. The primordial spirit seemed to be a little surprised. In the immemorial small Jianghu, the perfected nascent soul realm was a legend. Lin Yi had seen through his strength in one sentence. It was no wonder that Marquis Yu was not his opponent. If he was facing a practitioner at the perfected nascent soul realm, Lin Yi's soul-reaping hand might not be as easy as it was for Marquis Yu. But against a primordial spirit at the perfected nascent soul realm, there was nothing to be afraid of. With a wave of both hands, two pill fire flew out and easily destroyed the two formless vortexes on both sides. For the current Lin Yi, pill fire was already the most basic method to deal with primordial spirit enemies. It was not powerful, but it won in practicality. Interesting. Although the primordial spirit on the high platform was a little surprised by Lin Yi's pill fire, he was more interested in Lin Yi. The consciousness vortexes in the hall were just a small trick of his. After all, the strength that Lin Yi displayed at the moment was only at the great completion of the foundation establishment realm. Even if Marquis Yu was at a disadvantage in the hands of Lin Yi, it was impossible for him to really use his trump card right from the start. However, no matter how small the trick was, it was still the trick of a primordial spirit at the perfected nascent soul realm. Lin Yi was able to destroy two vortexes so effortlessly. It was enough to attract the primordial spirit's attention. Since you refused to trade, then I'll fulfill your wish. Before the primordial spirit's voice died away, more than 10 consciousness vortexes appeared around Lin Yi in an instant, frantically tearing at Lin Yi's body. In other words, it was tearing at the primordial spirit in Lin Yi's body. If it was a cultivator like Marquis Yu, it could be said that his primordial spirit would be immediately pulled out by this consciousness vortex. Even if it was not completely torn apart, it would definitely be injured to a certain extent. However, Lin Yi himself was a body formed by the primordial spirit, and his strength was no weaker than the primordial spirit on the high platform. Towards these consciousness vortexes, he did not really care. This move was somewhat similar to the soul hook hand, but it was not as overbearing as the soul hook hand. However, in terms of destructive power towards the primordial spirit, it was slightly higher than the soul hook hand. When he had the time, Lin Yi could study it. Lenny was now quite eager to attack the primordial spirit. It was rare to meet a primordial spirit master, so he immediately had the idea of secretly learning a few moves. Before, the heaven-devouring giant crocodile had given Lenny a lot of benefits, and now he met a guy that was even more powerful than the heaven-devouring giant crocodile. This trip to Tai Snake Island, even if he did not get the consciousness fruit and the heart of the consciousness fruit, it was still a worthwhile trip. Just when Lenny wanted to experience the principle and power of these consciousness vortexes, the primordial spirit on the high platform suddenly retracted the consciousness vortexes. Strange boy, he is obviously at the Foundation establishment great perfection, but he can actually persist in my consciousness vortex for a breath of time without his primordial spirit leaving his body. The primordial spirit looked at Lin Yi and said to himself strangely. When Marquis on the side heard this, he really wanted to say to his master, "This is not some weak chicken at the Foundation establishment great perfection. He is an existence that can instantly kill me, a nascent soul great perfection." This island master has suddenly changed his mind. "You look quite interesting. How about this? Hand over the heart of the consciousness fruit, and this island master will accept you as a younger brother, and let you be the chief steward of this Tai Snake Island. Then, I will give you a consciousness fruit. Quickly kneel down and thank me." Chapter 5462. Is there something wrong with this guy's brain? Did he eat too many brain-dead pills? Lenny was thunderstruck. He turned around and looked at Marquis with a strange expression. Taking Lenny as a follower? Head butler? Kneeling and thanking him? Thank your 8 generations of ancestors. Marquis was getting more and more embarrassed and speechless. His position as head butler had been transferred to Lenny out of the blue, and he couldn't even reason with it. Although he didn't know what brain-dead pills were, he felt that what Lenny said made sense. Of course, he wouldn't dare to say this even if he was beaten to death. Lenny wasn't someone to be trifled with, and his island master wasn't someone to be trifled with either. They were the top existences in the ancient underworld. Marquis just wanted to lie down and pretend to be dead. What? I have offered such a generous offer. Do you still want to die? The tone of the primordial spirit on the high platform was full of surprise, and he wasn't faking it. From his point of view, although Lenny was a little strange, he was still an ant. To be able to offer such an offer was definitely his generosity out of kindness. If Lenny still didn't know what was good for him, he would be too shameless. As expected, he ate too many brain-dead pills. Lenny shook his head helplessly, then shrugged and said, "Forget it, I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Since you're not sincere, the deal is off." After he finished speaking, Lenny performed the butterfly subtle steps and quickly retreated. "I've already said that this is my territory. It won't be so easy for you to leave." The primordial spirit snorted, and the surrounding stone pillars shone brightly. Rays of light that were visible to the naked eye crisscrossed and surrounded the entire hall, forming a giant cage. Lenny paused. He didn't really want to leave. Otherwise, he would have used the super butterfly subtle steps or even the extreme butterfly subtle steps. The reason he used the butterfly subtle steps was to give the primordial spirit a chance to attack and continue to study his primordial spirit attack skills. Unexpectedly, the primordial spirit didn't attack directly, but instead created a cage. The jade pendant would give off a warning when he got close to the rays. Obviously, if he touched it, it would be quite dangerous. As he stopped, Lenny casually shot out an alchemy fire, wanting to see if the rays could be destroyed with alchemy fire. Unfortunately, when the alchemy fire hit the rays, it was extinguished with a puff. Not even a spark was produced. The primordial spirit on the platform chuckled proudly and said, "Don't waste your energy. It's said that in my territory, no one can please me. Back then, even the primordial sky-devouring crocodile couldn't do anything in my territory, let alone you, a mere peak Foundation establishment cultivator." Hearing this, Lenny stopped and suddenly said with a strange expression, "Heaven-devouring giant crocodile, it seems that you can't do anything to him." The primordial spirit was startled and coughed. The heaven-devouring giant crocodile is now just a poor wandering soul. It seems that you have seen him. Let me tell you, if you don't surrender, your fate will be much more miserable than him. The heaven-devouring giant crocodile is a wandering soul, but your Taishi doesn't seem to be much stronger than him. Lin looked at the primordial spirit with a faint smile. If the heaven-devouring giant crocodile didn't have the obstruction of those divine sense tumors, it was estimated that it would have already reached the early stage of mysterious ascension, or even the peak of the early stage of mysterious ascension. After all, the 34 divine sense fruits were not eaten for nothing. As for this primordial spirit, its identity was already obvious. Who else could fight with the heaven-devouring giant crocodile, except for the Taishi Island? Good eyesight. Taishi primordial spirit did not hide, and directly admitted his identity. As for the things that Lin said that made him a little embarrassed, he selectively ignored them. I didn't expect you to be able to recognize this island master. Since you know this island master's true body, you should be more sensible and hand over the spiritual knowledge fruit's heart. The entire Tai Snake Island is formed from this island master's flesh and blood. If you want to die, you can try refusing me. Try it. Lin curled his lips and chuckled. The heaven-devouring giant crocodile wandered on Taishi Island, but I don't see you being able to do anything to him. Do you think you can scare me by bragging that Taishi Island is formed by your flesh? Taishi primordial spirit was aggrieved. This guy really touched his sore spot. The heaven-devouring giant crocodile was a thorn in his heart, but Lin repeatedly stabbed him. You don't know what's good for you. Then die for this island master. Taishi primordial spirit said angrily. Hundreds of tiny rays of light suddenly shot out from the surrounding stone pillars, concentrating around Lin Yi's body. This was not Taishi primordial spirit's own martial arts skill, but was completed through the array set up in this place. Its power was more than 1,000 times stronger than the previous divine sense vortex. Lin suddenly turned pale with fright. If not for the warning from the jade pendant, even if he used the extreme butterfly subtle steps, he might not be able to avoid the attack. If he was hit, he would definitely be seriously injured. These rays of light could cause the jade pendant to warn him, which meant that they could threaten Lin Yi's life. At this speed, Lin Yi did not even have time to transform into a primordial spirit. If he was not careful, he might really be tricked by Taishi primordial spirit. What? Taishi primordial spirit cried out involuntarily. At the same time he launched his attack, Lin Yi's figure disappeared in a flash, and all his attacks missed. This was something he had never encountered before. Before Taishi primordial spirit could lock onto Lin Yi again, Lin Yi had already appeared on the high platform like a ghost. He was only one step away from Taishi primordial spirit. It's impolite not to reciprocate. Island Master Taishi, please accept my reciprocation. Lin Yi smiled coldly, and released his primordial spirit to its fullest. Primordial spirit devour. Sensing that his primordial spirit was rapidly melting and being devoured by Lin Yi, Taishi primordial spirit suddenly screamed in panic. Originally, Lin Yi really did not want to devour Taishi primordial spirit. After all, devouring the heaven-devouring giant crocodile's primordial spirit had brought great benefits to Lin Yi, but it had also brought about the hidden danger of the divine sense tumor. If it was not necessary, Lin Yi did not want to continue devouring primordial spirits. However, Taishi primordial spirit's technique was enough to threaten Lin Yi's safety, which was why Lin Yi had used his most powerful primordial spirit technique. Ah, primordial spirit devour. You actually know primordial spirit devour. Ah, no. Stop. Senior, please spare my life. Taishi primordial spirit tumbled violently, desperately trying to resist Lin Yi's primordial spirit devour. Unfortunately, he was a primordial spirit, and in the face of this primordial spirit devour technique, there was almost no way for him to resist. In an instant, Taishi primordial spirit turned from a cloud of mist to a mini snake. This should be the original body of his primordial spirit. Chapter 5463. Not to mention Lin Yi, even Marquis Yu, who was under the high platform, was dumbfounded. Why did the arrogant Tai Shi suddenly lie down? Lin Yi twitched his mouth and stopped swallowing the spirit. The side effects of the giant crocodile's spirit had not been completely digested, so he would not swallow it if he could. Otherwise, Lin Yi did not know what the consequences would be if the spirit of Tai Shi, in the early stage of mysterious ascension realm, were to swallow it all. Oh, okay, then tell me what to do, Lin Yi asked lightly. Tai Shi, who had his life saved, carefully stole a glance at Lin Yi and said hesitantly, Senior, the heart of the spiritual knowledge fruit is the root of my Tai Shi island. Without the heart of the spiritual knowledge fruit, the spiritual knowledge fruit is gone. Lin Yi raised his eyebrows impatiently and waved his hand. Get to the point. Tai Shi was shocked and quickly said, the energy contained in the heart of the spiritual knowledge fruit is about 5 spiritual knowledge fruits. Can I give you 10 spiritual knowledge fruits in exchange? 10. After Lin Yi heard it, he could not help but smile. Tai Shi heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Lin Yi laughing. What a country bumpkin. Just 10 spiritual knowledge fruits, and he was so surprised and satisfied. Compared to the heart of the spiritual knowledge fruit, what was it? Oh, Lin Yi smiled and suddenly changed his expression. He said lightly, not exchanging. Not exchanging? Primordial spirit Tai Shi was dumbfounded. Why was he not exchanging? Wasn't it fine just now? What about the surprise? What about the satisfaction? Lin Yi looked at Tai Shi calmly and said, just 10 spiritual knowledge fruits. Do you think they can be compared with the heart of the spiritual knowledge fruit? I say, little snake, if you don't show some sincerity, we don't need to have a good chat, right? Tai Shi gritted his teeth in his heart, but on the surface, he had to continue to smile humbly. Senior, how can you say that I'm not sincere? The energy of the spiritual knowledge fruit's heart is indeed equivalent to 5 spiritual knowledge fruits. If you exchange it for 10 spiritual knowledge fruits, wouldn't it be quite profitable for Senior? Lin Yi glanced at Tai Shi and pretended to think for a moment before saying, since you said so, then fine, I'll take a loss. I'll use this spiritual awareness fruit heart, which is equivalent to 5 spiritual awareness fruits. After listening to the first half of Lin Yi's words, Tai Shi was filled with endless hope. But after listening to the second half, Tai Shi immediately wanted to fight with Lin Yi. But when he thought about it, if he were to risk his life, he would at most lose his life. It would not affect Lin Yi at all, so he could only continue to swallow his anger. Don't. Senior, how could 5 divine knowledge fruits be as effective as 10 divine knowledge fruits? Let's discuss it again. Tai Shi was afraid that Lin Yi would really take away the spiritual awareness fruit's heart, so he quickly squeezed out a flattering expression. Oh, what do you think if I kill you like this, then take away the spiritual awareness fruit's heart, and your 10 spiritual awareness fruits? Lin Yi's mouth evoked a playful smile as he said lightly to Tai Shi's spirit. Hey! Tai Shi's spirit suddenly quivered, and his small body immediately straightened. He said righteously, this is a great idea. But for a peerless person like Senior who is chivalrous, courageous, righteous, handsome, elegant, he will never use this kind of idea. After thinking about it, it seemed that something was wrong. Tai Shi's spirit quickly added weakly, I'm sorry, I spoke too fast. Just now the last evil never wins over good doesn't count. Lin Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't expect Tai Shi's flattering skills to be so good. He could even come up with a set of idioms. In the cultivation world, the strong preyed on the weak. It was not uncommon for people to kill others and steal their treasures. If Lin Yi could find the place where Tai Shi hid the spiritual awareness fruit, he could rob it. Robbing something from the hands of this pretentious Tai Shi would not feel any psychological burden. But the problem was that this hall should be covered by an array. Lin Yi could not find any trace of the spiritual awareness fruit at all. Since killing Tai Shi might not necessarily get the spiritual awareness fruit, the best way was naturally to exchange for it. In addition, Lin Yi had another consideration. The conventional rule of the cultivation world was that natural treasures should not be harvested. Leaving the roots for future generations meant leaving the roots for oneself. If there were no extra spiritual awareness fruit, Lin Yi would naturally not give up the heart of the spiritual awareness fruit, in order to deal with the cancer of the spiritual awareness fruit. But now that there were so many spiritual awareness fruit, it was a good choice to leave the heart of the spiritual awareness fruit on Taishi Island, and let the island continue to produce spiritual awareness fruit. Okay, stop talking nonsense. You take out all the spiritual awareness fruits you have, and I will let you live. I will also return the heart of the spiritual awareness fruit to you. Linny waved his hand and gave an extremely strong order. Taishi and Marquis Yu felt that these words and tone were very familiar. It seemed to be the way Taishi spoke to Linny just now. Both of them sighed in their hearts, and Taishi didn't dare be slow. He glanced at Linny and stuttered. Senior, it's not easy to form the spirit fruit. I really only have 10-12 of them. Originally, Taishi wanted to say that there were only 10, but when he saw Lin Yi's face sink slightly, he quickly added 2 more. To be honest, having 12 spiritual awareness fruits had already made Lin Yi quite satisfied, but looking at Taishi's appearance, he should still be hiding something. So Lin Yi narrowed his eyes and looked at Taishi coldly. Really? Really? Taishi's small snake head quickly nodded, for fear that Lin Yi would not believe it, and a series of afterimages appeared. Oh, so the giant heaven-devouring crocodile is much stronger than you. Lin Yi's mind turned and threw out the giant heaven-devouring crocodile to test Taishi. Normally, the giant heaven-devouring crocodile could get 34 spiritual awareness fruits. As the owner of Taishi Island, Taishi's spirit should not be worse than the giant heaven-devouring crocodile. Sure enough, when he heard the name of the giant heaven-devouring crocodile, Taishi's heart suddenly thumped. How could he forget this bastard shit-stirrer? This human had obviously seen the giant heaven-devouring crocodile before. Could he have heard something from the giant heaven-devouring crocodile? Taishi's mind raced. Before he could think of how to deal with Lin Yi, he heard Lin Yi say faintly, I haven't used the soul-searching technique for a long time. It seems that I have the opportunity to review it today. Hearing the word soul-searching technique, Taishi suddenly felt like his soul was about to leave his body. He was a spirit. How could he withstand the tyrannical destruction of the soul-searching technique? The outcome was not much different from being swallowed by Lin Yi's spirit. Senior, really, I really only have 20 spiritual awareness fruits. I don't have any more. In a hurry, Taishi's spirit roared and told the truth. Chapter 5464. Lin Yi looked at Essence Spirit Taishi teasingly and said with a faint smile, 20? Didn't you say 12 just now? Slip of the tongue. Slip of the tongue. You know how my mouth is sometimes. Tai Snake smiled awkwardly as he moved back subconsciously, afraid that Lin Yi would really use the soul-searching skill. It was better to stay away from dangerous people like this. Senior's aura shocked me, and I was nervous and said 20 is 12. Please forgive me, Senior. That's right, Lin Yi. Lin Yi naturally knew that Taishi was talking nonsense, but he didn't expose him. He just touched his chin with his hand and said to himself with a pondering expression, why is it different from what the heaven-devouring giant crocodile said? If I knew this earlier, I wouldn't have swallowed him completely just now. I should have left some to search his soul. When Essence Spirit Taishi heard Lin Yi's soft muttering, he was even more frightened. It turned out that the heaven-devouring giant crocodile had been swallowed. Fortunately, he didn't fight with this human, otherwise, he would have died with the heaven-devouring giant crocodile. As for whether Lin Yi was lying, Essence Spirit Taishi really didn't have any doubts. At this moment, he carefully felt that there was a trace of the Essence Spirit aura of the heaven-devouring giant crocodile on Lin Yi's body. He didn't notice it before, but now he could confirm it after careful observation. The highest level of lies was 9 truths and 1 lie. Lin Yi was just half-truths, but it was enough to deal with Essence Spirit Taishi. The frightened Essence Spirit Taishi didn't dare to hesitate. He was afraid that Lin Yi would search and devour his soul if he didn't agree. That would be too cruel. Plucking up his courage, Essence Spirit Taishi smiled flatteringly and said, Senior, Junior doesn't know what that damn crocodile said. Actually, Junior has an agreement with him. Lin Yi raised his eyebrows non-committally and didn't answer. He was originally lying to Essence Spirit Taishi, So of course, he wouldn't say anything to stop him. Seeing that Lenny didn't say anything, Taishi continued. Because of the experience of both sides suffering losses, the two of us made an agreement not to attack each other. The spiritual consciousness fruit is also picked by each of us. From Taishi's unconcealed explanation, Lenny learned how Taishi and the heaven-devouring giant crocodile divided the spiritual consciousness fruits. Due to the fact that both of them were heavily injured, they were extremely fearful of each other. Therefore, they did not dare to act rashly before they had absolute confidence. Under such circumstances, it was agreed that one person would take turns to pick the spiritual knowledge fruits. Last time, it was Taishi, and this time, it was sky-devouring giant crocodile. In other words, sky-devouring giant crocodile had 34 spiritual knowledge fruits. Theoretically, Taishi should also have at least 34 spiritual knowledge fruits. However, because of the existence of the Tai Snake Island trial, Tai Snake only obtained 20 spiritual consciousness fruits. He really did not lie to Lenny about this. Every time it was sky-devouring giant crocodile's turn, it would find the spiritual consciousness fruit first. It was just that this time, it was unlucky to meet its nemesis, Lenny. Otherwise, apart from Taishi, no one else could be its opponent. Every time, Taishi's consciousness fruit would have to wait until the end of the trial before Marquis Yu would pick it and give it to Taishi. 14 of the times, the trial takers had gotten it first, so Taishi only had 20 consciousness fruits. These spiritual consciousness fruits were of great use to Taishi. After accumulating 36 spiritual consciousness fruits, they were used in conjunction with the array. Therefore, none of them were used, unlike the sky-devouring giant crocodile, which ate every spiritual consciousness fruit it got. As for the Tai Snake Island trial, the purpose was to collect spiritual jades to maintain the spiritual energy of the entire Tai Snake Island. Only in this way could the spiritual consciousness fruits core produce spiritual consciousness fruits. Otherwise, how could Taishi be willing to let others take away the spiritual consciousness fruits? A sky-devouring giant crocodile took away half of it. So that's how it is. Lenny nodded. There were so many twists and turns behind this matter. But in any case, it was already an unexpected harvest to be able to obtain 20 spiritual consciousness fruits. Although Lenny did not say it, Taishi's essence soul still took out the 20 spiritual consciousness fruits. Lenny paid attention to it, and found that there was indeed a shielding array. If Taishi's essence soul did not take the initiative to take it out, he would not have been able to find it. Senior, these are all the spiritual consciousness fruits this junior has, please count them. Taishi's heart was bleeding. These were his treasures for many years. He was not willing to use any of them, but now they were all taken advantage of by Lenny. Facing Lenny, Taishi's essence soul really did not dare to play any tricks. He even hesitated to mention the spiritual consciousness fruit's core again, for fear of angering Lenny and making him want to devour and search his soul again. Lenny did not want to act shamelessly, leaving behind the spiritual consciousness fruit's core, and letting Tai Snake Island continue to produce spiritual consciousness fruits was originally part of his plan. So after collecting the 20 spiritual consciousness fruits, he happily took out the spiritual consciousness fruit's core. Primordial spirit Taishi was relieved. He beamed with joy and complimented, "Senior, you are really a trustworthy person. A promise is worth 1,000 gold. This junior's admiration for you is like a surging tide, continuous and endless." Lenny looked at Taishi's essence soul with a strange expression. This guy could even say such words? Did he also spend time in the secular world? Taishi did not know what Lenny was thinking, although losing his treasures for many years made him feel a little heartache, thinking that his old enemy, the heaven-devouring giant crocodile, was finished, and from now on, Tai Snake Island would be his to rule. With the spiritual consciousness fruit's core, would he be afraid of not having any spiritual consciousness fruits? No, since this human already knew about the spiritual consciousness fruit's core. Would he come to collect the spiritual consciousness fruits every year? If that was the case, what was the difference between having or not having the spiritual consciousness fruit's core? Taishi thought of this possibility and became depressed. He looked at Lin Yi and suddenly had an idea. He got closer and said, "Senior, I'm sorry. This junior admires you so much, and can't wait to follow senior all the time. Do you think you can accept this junior as your little brother?" "Accept you as my little brother?" Lin Yi suddenly felt like he was struck by lightning. This Taishi's brain was really unpredictable. If he did not give him the spiritual consciousness fruit's core just now, it was still understandable. Since he had already returned the spiritual consciousness fruit's core to him, why did he still say this? Was there really such a saying that when a tiger's body trembled, the king's aura would leak? In fact, Taishi's thinking was very simple. Lin Yi was such a powerful human, it was definitely impossible to fight against him. So relying on him was a good choice. Especially since Lin Yi looked decent. He should not rob his little brother's things, right? Even if he wanted the spiritual consciousness fruit, he would not leave nothing for Taishi. At least like the heaven-devouring giant crocodile, half each. How could Lin Yi guess Taishi's little plan? Thinking about it carefully, having a little brother like Taishi in the small ancient world did not seem to be a bad thing. Chapter 5465. About this. I have quite a lot of underlings. It doesn't seem like there's much use in taking you in. Lin Yi smiled and looked at the slightly stiff primordial spirit Taishi, looking like a picky shopper. Primordial spirit Taishi scolded in his heart. I have the strength of a mysterious ascending stage, the undisputed #1 snake of the immemorial Jianghu. Alright, I can barely be considered as the second snake. You should be lucky to be your underling. Are you planning to keep snatching the consciousness fruit in the future? Boss, you must take me in as your underling. In the future, you can take whatever you want from the treasures on this Taishi island. Although he was scolding in his heart, primordial spirit Taishi knew that the situation was not in his favor. So he could only continue to suck up to Lin Yi, even calling him boss. The dignified primordial spirit Taishi at the early stage of mysterious ascending stage, wagging his tail and begging to be someone's underling. There was no one else who could do this. Lin Yi nodded. Alright, seeing how sincere you are, I'll take you in as a follower for now. Lin Yi nodded. Alright, seeing how sincere you are, I'll take you in as a follower for now. Nominal underling? Damn it. You're the nominal underling. Your whole family are nominal underlings. Primordial spirit Taishi scolded in his heart, but on the surface, he looked pleasantly surprised. That's great. Boss, I'll work hard and try to get rid of the word nominal as soon as possible. Marquis, who was below the stage, had already turned around silently. He really could not bear to see this scene. The dignified island master of Taishi Island was rushing to be someone's underling. And it was just a nominal underling. Yet he was so happy. Then what about him, the underling of the nominal underling? Marquis looked at the sky at a 45-degree angle, speechless. Since I've become your boss, I'm not too embarrassed to take so many of your consciousness fruits. Lin Yi touched his chin, thinking that he should at least give some benefits to this underling. Primordial spirit Taishi was overjoyed. Could it be that he was going to return some of the consciousness fruits to me? It seemed that he did not become an underling for nothing. So be it. As long as there were benefits, it didn't matter if he was a follower or not. Of course, thinking about it was just thinking about it. Taishi still had to put on an act. Hence, he squeezed out a righteous look and said, Boss, what are you talking about? My stuff is my boss stuff. What's there to be embarrassed about? You're not giving me face by saying that. In that case, why don't you give me the knowledge fruit's heart as well? Lin Yi smiled mockingly. Taishi's primordial spirit was instantly silenced. Damn it, can't you let me live? I'm compromising to be a nominal little brother, just to keep the heart of the divine knowledge fruit. As soon as he became the boss, he wanted to ask for the divine knowledge fruit's core. Do you really think I have no temper? Alright, when it came to Lin Yi, the primordial spirit Taishi had to admit that it really did not have much of a temper. It could only stammer without being able to say anything. Lin Yi looked at it and suddenly laughed. I'm just teasing you. Since you're my little brother, I naturally can't take your things for free. The primordial spirit Taishi immediately showed a grateful look. But he continued to curse in his heart. Damn it, you scared me to death. However, the next moment, a piece of divine knowledge grass root fell in front of him. The pure divine knowledge energy contained in it was not inferior to the divine knowledge fruit. Divine knowledge grass root? The primordial spirit Tai Shi exclaimed. Happiness came too suddenly, and he was really caught off guard. Although the value of this piece of divine knowledge grass root was far from being comparable to 20 divine knowledge fruits, for the primordial spirit Tai Shi, it was more practical than 20 divine knowledge fruits. He had to collect 36 divine knowledge fruits before he could use them. They would not help him improve in a short period of time. However, the divine knowledge grass root could be used to immediately refine his primordial spirit and improve his strength. Thank you, boss. After getting the divine knowledge grass root, the primordial spirit Tai Shi really felt that Lin Yi did not call him boss for nothing. When he called him boss, he was finally more sincere. Lin Yi did not mind. Anyway, the divine knowledge grass root was not a problem for him. It was just a small piece, and it was just a drop in the ocean. He immediately waved his hand at the primordial spirit Tai Shi and said, "You continue to cultivate here. If there's anything, I'll look for you. Bye-bye." "Yes, boss. Goodbye, boss." The primordial spirit Tai Shi bowed to Lin Yi respectfully, and at the same time, he closed the formation completely. Lin Yi moved and appeared next to Marquis Yu. He said indifferently, "Caretaker Yu, I'll have to trouble you to send me out." Marquis Yu smiled and bowed. He said respectfully, "Yes, old master." Lin Yi slipped and almost fell to the ground. "Pooh, old master? What the hell was that?" Marquis Yu did not think that there was anything wrong with calling him old master. However, when he saw the strange expression on Lin Yi's face, he still explained, "You're my boss. According to the humans, you're the master of masters, so you're old master." "Motherfucker, you're the old master." Lin Yi rolled his eyes. He thought to himself, "I'm such a handsome young man. What do I have to do with an old master?" He did not know if this Marquis Yu did it on purpose. Lin Yi snorted and said, "Forget it. Just call me Senior Lin, or Boss Lin in the future. Old master or something, you can keep it for yourself." I don't dare. How can I use such an honorable title?" Marquis Yu was very humble. However, when he saw Lin Yi's unfriendly gaze, he immediately changed his tone and said, "But since Boss Lin ordered it, then I'll call you Boss Lin from now on. Let's put it this way then." Lin Yi waved his hand casually. He could not be bothered to waste his breath on such a small issue. He was in a great mood after obtaining 20 God knowledge fruits. Marquis Yu turned his body slightly and led the way with a half-bent waist. His face was filled with a flattering smile, looking very much like a lackey. Lin Yi shook his head secretly. Although such a person's abilities were not bad and much stronger than Bing Wuqing's, his future achievements could not be compared to Bing Wuqing's. The two of them went back the way they came, and quickly returned to the exit of the trial. Bing Wuqing and Chu Tianlu had already left. Fortunately, they had not been separated for a long time, and Lin Yi had also arranged a rendezvous point with them. It would not be long before they caught up to the two of them. "Boss Lin, are you preparing to leave? Do you need me to prepare a flying spirit beast for you?" Marquis Yu could not wait for Lin Yi to leave, but he put on a loyal look on his face. Lin Yi smiled and said, "All right, I'll have to trouble you then." When Lin Yi came, he rode on Ling Tianyu's flying spirit beast. At this time, Ling Tianyu and the others had already left. Bing Wuqing was with Chu Tianlu, so Lin Yi really did not have a means of transportation. Although Lin Yi could fly in his primordial spirit form, it was not as comfortable as riding on a flying spirit beast. Chapter 5466. Marquis Yu nodded and bowed with a smile. "It's no trouble at all. It's my honor to be able to do something for you, Boss Lin." As he spoke, Marquis Yu turned his head and whistled. Soon, an aerial spirit beast flew over from a nearby hill at a high speed. Lin Yi landed steadily on the back of the aerial spirit beast with a tap of his foot. He said to Marquis Yu calmly, "That's it then. We'll meet again if we have the chance." Before he finished speaking, the aerial spirit beast flapped its wings and flew more than 10 meters away in an instant, leaving Tai Snake Island in no time. The flying spirit beast was rather tame, and Lin Yi controlled it to fly to the rendezvous point quickly. It was a barren little island about 30 miles away from Tai Snake Island, and with their current speed, it would only take a few minutes to get there. Are these essential energy waves caused by a battle? After flying for nearly half the distance, Lin Yi sensed some movement in the distance. He frowned immediately. That direction should be the island where he had agreed to meet Bing Wuqing and Chu Tianlu. Since a battle had broken out, it was most likely that Bing Wuqing and Chu Tianlu were in trouble. Buddy, go faster. Lin Yi patted the aerial spirit beast beneath him lightly. With the intelligence of the aerial spirit beast, it could naturally understand Lin Yi's meaning. After Lin Yi finished speaking, its flying speed instantly increased by more than 50%. This aerial spirit beast was indeed holding back. After switching from long-distance running mode to 100-meter sprint mode, the remaining distance was quickly left behind Lin Yi. The small island also appeared completely in front of Lin Yi's eyes. What a big crab! I wonder if it tastes good steamed. Lin Yi saw that Bing Wuqing and Chu Tianlu were still unharmed. He immediately relaxed and muttered with a smile. At this time, on the small island, Bing Wuqing was fighting with a huge sea crab. Judging from the size of the sea crab, it was basically the size of a container truck. To it, Bing Wuqing was nothing more than a snack to fill the gap between its teeth. A sea monster of the early nascent soul realm. No wonder Bing Wuqing couldn't handle it. Lin Yi nodded to himself. He felt that this matter was really fucked up. They had agreed on a random location, and it had only been a short while since they had parted ways. Yet Bing Wuqing and the others had managed to encounter such a powerful sea beast. Their luck was unparalleled. Logically speaking, with Bing Wuqing's strength, there really weren't many who could rival her in the primordial underworld. After all, she was a genius, and it was common for her to fight someone of a higher level than her. However, sea monsters of the same level were usually stronger than humans under normal circumstances. Furthermore, Bing Wuqing had already expended a lot of her physical strength and vital energy, so it was reasonable that she couldn't defeat this giant sea crab. Most importantly, sea beasts were born to be extremely powerful water beasts. Bing Wuqing's merciless ice force did not have much of an effect on them. The gigantic sea crab bird did not even bat an eyelid at her freezing ability. As for Chu Tianlu, let's not talk about him. In a battle of this level, it was already thanks to the immovable shadow martial art technique that he was able to stand firmly on the edge. Bing Wuqing was panting heavily. This cold and arrogant man was starting to feel like he could no longer withstand the huge consumption of energy. If not for the black ice supporting him, he would have been defeated a long time ago. However, he had expended too much vital energy now, and the black ice was almost unusable. The giant sea crab did not make much of a move. It merely spat out a string of bubbles from its mouth, which swirled around Bing Wuqing. Bing Wuqing then used the black icicles in her hand to deal with the bubbles. Human, are you still not giving up? Your grandpa crab hasn't even made a move, and I can already toy you to death. Why do you need to put up such pointless resistance? The sea crab looked relaxed and at ease. It seemed to be enjoying the feeling of toying with Bing Wuqing in the palm of its hand. Bing Wuqing snorted coldly and said, "Cut the crap. Come and fight me if you can. Don't spit saliva all day and make me sick." As she spoke, Bing Wuqing punctured another 4 bubbles, and the aura on her body weakened a little. Although the sea crab's bubbles did not seem to be very powerful, they were not. If one was trapped by the bubbles, their vital energy would be continuously extracted, and it would be even more difficult to break the bubbles from the inside. It seemed like she could puncture the bubbles very easily now. In fact, Bing Wuqing had already tried it. Normal attacks were completely useless. Only the black ice's attacking ability could achieve this. Seeing that Bing Wuqing's life was not in danger for the time being, Lin Yi was in no hurry to act. Although Bing Wuqing was a genius, the rate at which her abilities were improving was still a little too fast. This giant sea crab was a good whetstone for Bing Wuqing to hone her skills. especially since the sea crab happened to restrain Bing Wuching in all aspects, which could put Bing Wuching in a difficult situation. After this battle, he believed that Bing Wuching would gain a lot. In the midst of the battle, Bing Wuching had already noticed the flying spirit beast in the sky. When she saw that it was Lin Yi, she felt much more assured. Unknowingly, in Bing Wuching's mind, there was nothing that Lin Yi couldn't handle. Lin Yi did not act immediately. Bing Wuching immediately understood Lin Yi's intention. She calmed her mind and continued to deal with the giant sea crab. However, after the giant sea crab noticed Lin Yi's arrival, it did not turn a blind eye to him. While it continued to trap Bing Wuching, it said to Lin Yi, "Another human has come. You've gained a lot today. Do you want to surrender? There are idiots every year, but there are especially many this year." Speechless, Lin Yi shook his head and said calmly, "You're just an early-stage nascent soul sea monster. I don't know where you get your confidence from, asking people if they want to surrender whenever they see them. Oh, you make it sound like you're very powerful. The truth is, Lord Crab has no interest in a weakling like you. But since you're so arrogant, I might have to teach you a good lesson." Big Ao, the sea crab, waved its hand, and a water bubble flew toward Lin Yi in the sky. From the sea crab's point of view, Lin Yi was just an ant at Foundation Establishment Great Completion. If not for the fact that the flying spirit beast looked pretty good, it would not have bothered with him at all. Sending a water bubble over was already showing great respect for Lin Yi. In a flash, Lin Yi left the back of the flying spirit beast and pounced toward the sea crab. The water bubble swayed in the air, turned, and continued to chase after Lin Yi. Judging from the fight between Bing Wuching and the sea crab, this thing's outer shell was extremely hard, and Bing Wuching's attacks could not break through it. Although Lin Yi had all kinds of tricks up his sleeves, his primordial spirit was only at Foundation Establishment Great Completion after all. His physical attacks were definitely no match for Bing Wuching's. Fortunately, Lin Yi was already used to using his primordial spirit to attack. In order to keep Bing Wuching as a practice target, Lin Yi could not use the soul reaping palm right from the start. So he chose Taishi's consciousness vortex. Chapter 5467. A Genius in a Second to Remember Love Go Away? The internet provides you with exciting novels to read. Lin Yi had been trying to figure out how to use the consciousness vortex. Although he hadn't completed it yet, he had some ideas, so he decided to use this giant crab as practice. An invisible consciousness vortex appeared on top of the crab's head. The size of this consciousness vortex was quite exquisite. It was about 1/5 the size of Taishi's consciousness vortex. Lin Yi wasn't disappointed. It was good enough that it could reach this level. He was already prepared that he wouldn't be able to activate it. Now that he saw the exquisite consciousness vortex, he felt a little proud. The giant crab's physical defense was definitely strong, but its primordial spirit was just so. The consciousness vortex that Lin Yi had created was probably useless against Bing Wuching, but it worked surprisingly well on the giant crab's head. "Gah! What's this? You're making Uncle Crab dizzy." The giant crab's two eyes moved left and right a few times. Even its huge body started to shake. The consciousness vortex tugged at the giant crab's primordial spirit a few times. Although it didn't pull it out, it still shook it. Lin Yi smiled and encouraged Bing Wuching. "This idiot's silly bubbles have exploded. Little Bing Bing, hurry up and beat him up." After Lin Yi's attack was effective, he did not continue to attack. Instead, he gave the opportunity to Bing Wuching. The only thing he could do was to protect Bing Wuching and weaken the opponent's strength to a level that Bing Wuching could handle. Bing Wuching was speechless. "Little Bing Bing? What the hell? Although you're my boss, you can't attack me personally, can you?" However, Bing Wuching really didn't have time to complain. Because of the shaking of the primordial spirit, the giant crab's bubbles lost control for a moment, and then they exploded. Bing Wuching, who had been surrounded by the bubbles, suddenly jumped up. Black icicles, driven by vital energy consumption, stabbed at the giant crab's two eyes like lightning. "Despicable human, do you think you can sneak up on Uncle Crab like this? Too naive, Don't look down on me. The crab had recovered slightly and noticed Bing Wuching's sneak attack. It roared loudly and swung its huge crab claw. Sure enough, if you spit out too many bubbles, you will also become a silly bubble. Lin Yi sighed and threw out another spiritual consciousness vortex. He clearly knew that it was Lin Yi who had knocked him out, but he had still only paid attention to Bing Wuching. This crab's intelligence was indeed a sore point. The damage caused by Lin Yi's spiritual vortex, which he was not familiar with, was basically negligible. However, it was quite good for restraining, especially against sea beasts like the sea crab, that had weak primordial spirit defenses. After taking another hit from the consciousness whirlpool, the crab's primordial spirit trembled again as expected. Bing Wuching's attack, which was used to defend and counterattack at the same time, came to a halt. The slightest difference could lead to a great difference. Bing Wuching did not encounter any resistance, and the black icicle successfully pierced the crab's eye. Ah, despicable human, you only know how to sneak attack your master crab. Just you wait for Master Crab. The crab roared and turned to retreat into the sea, intending to escape. To be honest, the crab was really panicking now. Being blinded by the icicle was not a big deal. At his level, he could still use some heaven and earth treasures to recover. The problem was that the seemingly weak human was knocking him out again and again. If this went on, he probably wouldn't have the chance to use any heaven and earth treasures. Lin Yu might have foolishly mocked the crab, but the crab was definitely not stupid. In a life-and-death situation, he had to run if he could. As for whether he could escape, that was another matter entirely. Lin Yi threw another spiritual consciousness vortex over to interrupt the crab's escape. He turned to Bing Wuching and said, "Little Bing Bing, I'll leave this silly bubble to you. Don't hold back, make a seafood feast." Bing Wuching nodded with a cold expression. She was seriously considering whether she should change her surname. Little Bing Bing was too mushy. She did not know why Big Boss suddenly started giving people nicknames after meeting the island lord of Spirit Snake Island alone. Lin Yi was secretly laughing at this moment. Of course, he had called her Little Bing Bing on purpose. He was just venting his displeasure at being called a grandpa. It was only natural for him to call his little brother Little Bing Bing. With endless resentment for being called Little Bing Bing, Bing Wuching instantly appeared behind the crab and thrust her black icicle with all her might. Ow wow! The blind crab screamed loudly. Lin Yi could not bear to look at it. Puffed! Little Bing Bing, you're too dirty. You actually went and pierced someone's anus. The corner of Bing Wuching's mouth twitched. In a barely audible voice she said, "I really didn't do it on purpose." The blind crab, whose anus had been pierced, was completely enraged. It flailed its 8 long legs in a frenzy, then desperately fled into the sea. This time, Lin Yi did not continue using the spiritual consciousness vortex. Although it was getting easier and easier to use, Lin Yi still gave the opportunity to Bing Wuching. Merciless Ice Force. The next moment, a huge chill enveloped the crab's huge body. The pressure did not have much effect on it before, but it was obviously different this time. After Bing Wuching unleashed the merciless ice force, the crab's huge body was forcefully pressed down. At the same time, a layer of frost rapidly formed on its surface. The corner of Lin Yi's mouth curled into a satisfied smile. Bing Wuching was indeed a cultivation genius. She had actually improved the merciless ice force in the midst of battle. Within the merciless ice force, tiny black ice crystals were faintly floating in the air. It was precisely these tiny black ice crystals that caused the power of the merciless ice force to undergo an earth-shattering change. Geniuses indeed needed to grow through battle. At this point, Lin Yi knew that he no longer needed to interfere. With Bing Wuching's current merciless ice force, even the crab at its peak might not be a match for Bing Wuching, let alone the blind crab whose anus had been pierced. A moment later, Bing Wuching finally finished off the giant crab. She had also completely exhausted all her vital energy. She lay limply on the ground, not wanting to move. Lin Yi came to Bing Wuching's side, took out a few pieces of supreme-grade spirit jades, and said, "Recover for a while, and recall the details of the battle at the same time." This is a rare and precious experience. Yes. Bing Wuching quickly sat up, took the spirit jades and said gratefully, "Thank you, Big Boss Lin Yi. Don't stand on ceremony with me." Lin Yi waved his hand and said, "You know my personality. I won't mistreat those who are loyal to me. All right, I'll stand guard for you." Chapter 5468. A genius in a second to remember love/go away? To provide you with exciting novels to read. Okay. Bing Wuching didn't argue. After sitting down cross-legged, she suddenly thought of something and said hesitantly, "Well, Boss Lin Yi, can you not call me Little Bing Bing in the future?" Lin Yi broke into laughter, thinking that someone finally understood how he felt when he was called an old man. He waved his hand generously and said, "No problem. I won't call you that in the future." Bing Wuching closed her eyes in relief and prepared to cultivate and recover. However, Lin Yi's next sentence almost drove her crazy. "Then how about calling you Deep Well Bing?" What the hell? Bing Wuching was a little confused. Boss Lin Yi was a decent person before. Why did he suddenly become like this? What kind of stimulation did he receive? Bing Wuching would never know that it was because Marquis Yu had called Lin Yi an old man, that Lin Yi had shifted his resentment onto him. Of course. It was also because Lin Yi was a little happy after obtaining the 20 God knowledge fruits. The tumor in his body could probably be removed, so he joked a little more. Seeing that Bing Wuching had entered a state of cultivation, Chu Tianlu walked over and greeted Lin Yi. "Senior Lin, thank you for saving me again. This sea crab is full of treasures. Why don't you let me help you and Senior Bing clean it up first?" Lin Yi glanced at Chu Tianlu and nodded. "All right, I'll have to trouble you then. Tell me what treasures are on this sea crab." When he was on Heaven Level Island, the sea beasts in the endless sea had never been conquered. Lin Yi had only fought them a few times and didn't know much about them. Even an old captain like Okuda Dam knew very little about sea beasts. But now it seemed that the sea beasts in the ancient underworld weren't particularly strong, so Lin Yi was naturally interested. "It's no trouble at all. It's what I should do." Chu Tianlu laughed modestly, then immediately introduced, "This sea crab's carapace is extremely hard, a good material for forging armor, while its toes are good materials for forging weapons. The most valuable thing is his inner core. The inner core of an early-stage nascent soul realm sea beast is a priceless treasure." When the value of sea beasts' inner cores was mentioned, Chu Tianlu's face immediately became radiant. The inner cores of sea beasts in the initial stage of the nascent soul stage are the main ingredients for refining nascent soul golden cores. Only experts like Senior Lin and Senior Bing can easily deal with nascent soul stage sea beasts. Normally, even if there were a few more nascent soul old monsters, they might not be able to do it. Every nascent soul old monster was the cornerstone of each sect. Even if they knew that the inner core of the sea beast was precious, they wouldn't dare to touch it easily. If something happened to them, the sect behind them would be finished. This could be seen from the Thousand Blades sect's fate after Primordial Invincible left. "Oh, you said that the inner core of sea beasts can be used to refine nascent soul golden cores?" Lin Yi was quite surprised. All along, he thought that nascent ginseng was indispensable for refining nascent soul golden cores, but now that he heard that the inner core of nascent soul stage sea beasts could also be used to refine nascent soul golden cores, he immediately became very interested. After all, nascent ginseng was rare, and sea beasts were easy to come by. For Lin Yi, even if he already had a whole nascent ginseng, there would always be a time when it was used up. But in the endless ocean, sea beasts wouldn't all die. Chu Tianlu nodded. "The inner cores of sea beasts are used to refine pills. Senior Lin, you're not an alchemist, so perhaps you're not very clear about this. For example, foundation building pills, golden cores, and so on, are all refined from the inner cores of corresponding foundation building and golden core sea beasts. It's just that sea beasts aren't easy to catch, so there aren't many pills circulating in the world." Oh, Lin Yi smiled faintly. He didn't say that the pills he refined were much more than what Chu Tianlu had seen. Instead he asked, It's not easy to catch sea beasts of golden core and nascent soul stage. But is it also not easy to catch sea beasts of foundation building stage? Foundation building stage is easy to catch, but there are too few sea beasts of foundation building stage. Chu Tianlu shook his head with a bitter smile and explained, all the sea beasts in the coastal sea are basically below foundation building stage. Even if you catch them, it won't be of much use. In the deep sea, there are sea beasts of foundation building stage, but they are all young sea beasts. If you want to catch them, you have to face powerful adult sea beasts. It's almost the same as catching sea beasts of golden core and nascent soul stage. So that's how it is. Lenny nodded and didn't take it to heart. With his strength, whether it was his original body or his primordial spirit, it was relatively easy to catch sea beasts of nascent soul stage. He just didn't know if the inner cores of sea beasts of profound ascension stage were the same. However, it was probably very difficult to find sea beasts of profound ascension stage in the small Jianghu. He would think about it when he returned to the heavenly island. You seem to understand the inner cores of sea beasts quite well. Are you an alchemist? Lenny asked casually. Since he knew that the inner cores of sea beasts could be used for alchemy, he had to find a way to get the pill recipe and try it out. If Chu Tianlu had the pill recipe, Lenny wouldn't mind exchanging some things for it. Unfortunately, Chu Tianlu shook his head regretfully and said, Junior's aptitude is mediocre. I don't have the talent to be an alchemist at all. Speaking up to this point, Chu Tianlu showed a bashful expression on his face and said hesitantly, Senior Lin, Junior has a presumptuous request. I wonder if Senior Lin can sell this crab's inner core to Junior for a price? You want this inner core? Lenny looked at Chu Tianlu amusedly. This guy was really an honest person. He clearly wanted this inner core, but he first praised it. Was he afraid that others wouldn't raise the price? Chu Tianlu's face was slightly red, and he said very embarrassedly, Junior knows that the inner core of a nascent soul stage sea beast is extremely precious, but Junior's grandfather's birthday is coming soon. If I can get the inner core of a nascent soul stage sea beast and give it to Junior's grandfather, it can help him advance to the peak of the early nascent soul stage. After a slight pause, Chu Tianlu added, Senior Lin, what price do you want? As long as you can transfer this inner core to Junior, Junior will definitely find a way to do it. If you get this inner core, can you refine it into a nascent soul golden core? Or, do you have the pill recipe for a nascent soul golden core? Lenny didn't care much about this sea beast's inner core. It didn't matter even if he gave it to Chu Tianlu. After all, if Chu Tianlu hadn't been so honest, Lenny wouldn't have been able to obtain the 20 divine knowledge fruits. At worst, he could just catch another sea beast when he wanted to experiment with alchemy. What was important now was the pill recipe for using the sea beast's inner core to refine pills. Chu Tianlu hesitated, then said, If it's refining pills with Junior's family connections, there shouldn't be a problem. As for the pill recipe, Tianliang is an alchemist. He might have the pill recipe for a nascent soul golden core. Chapter 5469. Genius 1 second. Remember, if you want to go? TalkNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Lenny recalled that Chu Tianliang knew how to use the pillfire bomb. He was indeed a pill refiner, but was that guy already dead? If you can give me some recipes for refining a sea beast's inner core, I'll give this inner core to you. Lenny didn't beat around the bush, and directly threw out his conditions. After all, this thing was dispensable to Lin Yi, and Chu Tianlu wasn't suited to beating around the bush. Love go little talk. Chu Tianlu was a straightforward person, but he wasn't really stupid. He immediately reacted and asked in surprise, Senior Lin, you're a pill refiner? Sort of. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Maybe a little better than Chu Tianliang. Chu Tianlu was immediately overjoyed, but also somewhat bewildered. He didn't know how to react for a moment. Does your clan have a recipe for this type of pill? Lin Yi thought that the matter of Duan Muyu's marriage had to be resolved sooner or later. It just so happened that he had this excuse. He'd conveniently go to the Chu clan and help Duan Muyu get rid of this trouble. There should be. Chu Tianlu was indeed a straightforward guy. Even now, he didn't say anything definite. Even if there isn't, with our clan's connections, we can quickly find a recipe. Love Gob little talk netku. In fact, Chu Tianlu also knew that using an affirmative answer to befriend Lin Yi was the best. Just as he said, even if the Chu clan didn't have a recipe, with their clan's strength, it wouldn't be difficult for them to acquire one. These details could be completely omitted from Lin Yi, but Chu Tianlu didn't like to lie, so he told the truth. Senior Lin, since you need a recipe, why don't you come with me to my clan? I believe my grandfather will be very happy to get to know you, Senior Lin. Chu Tianlu sincerely extended an invitation. Lin Yi nodded. That's fine. Your grandfather's birthday is just around the corner. I'll go and congratulate him. That's great. To be able to receive Senior Lin's presents. Our Chu family is greatly honored by your presence. Chu Tianlu rubbed his hands excitedly. To be able to have a good relationship with Lin Yi, no matter if it was for the Chu family or for Chu Tianlu himself, it was extremely important. As for Lin Yi's intention to ruin the marriage alliance between Duanmu Yu and the Chu clan, Chu Tianlu didn't know about it. Even if he did, it wouldn't matter. He had no interest in the marriage alliance to begin with. If he knew that Duanmu Yu was related to Lin Yi, he would definitely ask his clan to terminate the marriage alliance with the Yiling sect. Senior Lin, please take a rest first. I'll go get rid of this crab. We'll set off once Senior Bing recovers. Chu Tianlu bowed slightly. After waiting for Lin Yi to nod in agreement, he quickly took out a short knife and went to deal with the sea crabs. It could be seen that Chu Tianlu had a certain amount of experience in dealing with the carcasses of sea beasts. Although the shell of the sea crabs was quite hard, Chu Tianlu's short knife penetrated deep into the seams of the crab's body. Then he followed the lines and dissected the crab's shell. His movements were quite smooth. After more than 10 minutes, Chu Tianlu had dissected the shell of the sea crabs. Together with the claws, they piled up into a small hill as tall as 2 people. Senior Lin, this is the inner core of the sea crabs. Please keep it well. Chu Tianlu held a water blue inner core the size of 2 fists in his hands and ran over to present it to Lin Yi. Although this was what Chu Tianlu wanted, he didn't covet it at all. He looked very natural. Lin Yi casually took the inner core of the sea crabs and sensed the pure waves of spiritual power within it. He smiled faintly and said, "Thank you for your hard work." At this moment, Bing Wuqing finished her cultivation. She suddenly stood up and said excitedly, "Big brother, I've recovered. And I seem to have stabilized my strength. Just in time. We can set off now." Lin Yi nodded in satisfaction. He could feel that Bing Wuqing's aura had become much more solid. Although she hadn't broken through, she had definitely improved a lot compared to before. By the way, why don't you give this inner core of the sea crabs to me? I'll give you some other benefits later. In name, the sea crabs were killed by Bing Wuqing. Lin Yi didn't want to put on a domineering attitude in front of his underlings, so he asked for her opinion. "Big brother Lin Yi, what are you talking about?" Bing Wuqing immediately said solemnly, "If you hadn't helped me in time, I would have been killed by this sea crab. Everything I have was given to me by you, Bing Wuqing. Even if I was the one who killed this sea crab, everything still belongs to you, boss. Needless to say, you were the one who killed this sea crab, so all the credit goes to you, boss." Hearing that Bing Wuqing, a nascent soul realm old monster, was so obedient to Lin Yi, Chu Tianlu was instantly moved. He was even more determined to befriend Lin Yi. Lin Yi didn't stand on ceremony anymore. He nodded and smiled. "All right, you've been so cold before, but you're so talkative today. In any case, I won't mistreat my own people. Let's pack up and make a trip to the Chu clan." In fact, with Bing Wuqing's current status, it wasn't a problem at all for her to purchase a few elixir recipes. But since Lin Yi had said so, she naturally wouldn't object. As long as it was Lin Yi's decision, she would carry it out completely. The sea crab's inner core was secretly kept in the space in the jade pendant by Lin Yi. However, the outer shell and the toes were not very convenient. After all, Chu Tianlu wasn't someone Lin Yi could trust completely. Not to mention that this fellow was an honest person. There was no telling when he might expose Lin Yi's secret. Fortunately, Lin Yi's flying spiritual beast was still hovering in the air. Chu Tianlu packed up the spoils of war and placed them on his own flying spiritual beast. He let Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing ride on Lin Yi's flying spiritual beast, while he led the way on his own flying spiritual beast. After setting off, Bing Wuqing regained her usual cold expression. She had always been a cold person, so she couldn't find any topics to talk about. She could only stay behind Lin Yi and continue to reminisce about the previous battle experience. For hours later, the two flying spiritual beasts arrived at a stretch of hills. The Chu clan was located in the middle of these hills. Before the old master of the Chu clan broke through to the nascent soul stage, the Chu clan was just an insignificant clan. Now that there was a nascent soul old monster holding the fort, their social status immediately changed. That was why they wanted to form a marriage alliance with the Yiling sect, hoping to advance further and enter the ranks of the 10 small sects and clans. Chu Tianlu, who was in front, slowed down and came to the side of Lin Yi's flying spiritual beast. He cupped his hands and said, "Senior Lin, our Chu clan is right in front. I have already sent a message saying that a distinguished guest will be visiting. I believe that my family will be very happy to welcome Senior Lin." However, Lin Yi didn't feel that the Chu clan was very welcoming of him. When he and Bing Wuqing followed Chu Tianlu into the Chu clan's main gate, no one came to welcome the distinguished guest that Chu Tianlu had mentioned. Not only that, even the people who opened the door had a cold expression on their faces. Chapter 5470. Heh. It seems that you, the young master of the Chu clan, aren't doing very well. Lin Yi looked at Chu Tianlu with a strange expression. He originally thought that Chu Tianlu's position in the Chu clan was at least slightly higher than Chu Tianliang's. Otherwise, Chu Tianliang wouldn't want to deal with Chu Tianlu. However, the current situation was that Chu Tianlu couldn't even obtain the respect of a disciple. As the dignified young master of the Chu clan's direct line of descent, he was truly speechless. Chu Tianlu smiled awkwardly. This disciple belonged to Chu Tianliang's father's faction, so it was normal that they didn't care about Chu Tianlu. As for the information that was sent back before, it was probably intercepted by them. Although Chu Tianlu understood, he didn't explain anything to Lin Yi. After all, he was an honest person. Following the principle of not airing family shame in public, he forced a smile and led Lin Yi in. "Senior Lin, please forgive me. My grandfather is probably in closed-door training, so he didn't receive this junior's message. I've neglected you." Chu Tianlu apologized, thinking that it was good to see his grandfather. Not to mention Lin Yi's strength, just his identity as an alchemist who could refine nascent soul golden pills was a top-notch existence in the small Jianghu. It was enough to be on equal footing with the core members of the 4 great sects and 10 small clans. Chu Tianlu concluded that it was impossible for his grandfather to ignore Lin Yi's arrival. "It's fine." Lin Yi waved his hand indifferently. At his level, he wouldn't care about small things at all. Moreover, his main purpose of coming here was to make the Chu clan take the initiative to break off the engagement, so that the Yiling sect wouldn't be put in a difficult position. If he really received a warm welcome, he really wouldn't be able to open his mouth when the time came. If that idiot Chu Tianliang came back, he might be able to stir up some trouble and give Lin Yi more excuses. If he had known earlier, he would have pulled Chu Tianliang along. Just as Lin Yi was feeling regretful in his heart, he discovered through his divine sense that there were more than 10 golden core cultivators standing in a courtyard not far away. All of them looked unfriendly, and their target seemed to be Lin Yi's group of 3. Were they trying to stir up trouble? Lin Yi was not surprised but happy. Someone sent him a pillow just when he was dozing off. Immediately, he secretly transmitted his vital energy to Bing Wuqing. "Wuqing, if anything happens later, don't do anything. Don't do anything for the time being without my orders." Bing Wuqing nodded without hesitation. As for the reason, Lin Yi's words were the reason. As long as they executed it accurately, it would be fine. As for the others who saw him nod, it didn't matter. They didn't know what it meant anyway. After a dozen steps, they passed through the eaves and entered the courtyard in front of the hall. It was the place where Lin Yi's divine sense had found someone. Chu Tianlu raised his eyes and saw the dozen or so golden core clansmen in the courtyard. He was slightly startled, wondering if they were here to welcome Senior Lin. Even though they didn't greet him directly at the main entrance, this was still a grand lineup. Almost 90% of the Chu clan's upper echelons were present. Second uncle, did you receive my message and come to welcome the honored guest? A smile appeared on Chu Tianlu's face. He quickened his steps and saluted the middle-aged man in the middle. This sinister-looking middle-aged man was Chu Tianliang's father. He was in charge of the Chu clan's finances and cultivation resources, and he was Chu Hongding. Chu Tianlu was about to introduce these clansmen to Lin Yi and let Chu Hongding know Lin Yi's identity and strength, but he was interrupted by Chu Hongding. What honored guest? These two juniors? Chu Hongding snorted coldly and glanced disdainfully at Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing. He couldn't see through Bing Wuqing's cultivation, but Lin Yi's strength was clearly displayed. He was only a consummate foundation building. Bing Wuqing was half a step behind Lin Yi and was following beside him. It was obvious that she wasn't as powerful as Lin Yi. No matter how powerful she was only slightly more powerful than Lin Yi. She wasn't worth his attention at all. It was Chu Tianlu's fault. His previous message simply said that there were honored guests coming, and that the clan should prepare a grand welcoming ceremony. He didn't even mention Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing's identities and strength. Otherwise, Bing Wuqing's identity alone would be enough for the Chu clan to prepare a welcoming ceremony of the highest standard. Second uncle, you didn't know. Chu Tianlu hurriedly tried to explain. Even though Chu Hongding's faction didn't like him, Chu Tianlu was an honest man. He still thought about the Chu clan's overall situation. Unfortunately, Chu Hongding didn't want to listen to Chu Tianlu at all. He continued to snort coldly and interrupted. I didn't know you were so daring. Speak. Where's your conscience? Also, why did Wenshang and Xingping's soul jade tablets shatter? Did you collude with outsiders and plot against them? This was truly a case of, if you want to incriminate someone, you can always find a pretext. Only then did Lin Yi realize that Chu Hongding had been waiting for Chu Tianlu. However, it was no wonder. Chu Tianlu and Chu Tianliang had left together. Chu Wenshang and Chu Xingping were Chu Tianliang's people. Chu Tianliang also had the offensive and defensive treasures that Chu Hongding had secretly given him. No matter how one looked at it, Chu Tianlu should have died in the Taishi Island trial. However, the one who had returned was Chu Tianlu. Chu Tianliang's whereabouts were unknown, and Chu Wenshang and Chu Xingping were confirmed dead. Even if it wasn't Chu Hongding, who was bent on finding fault with them, any higher-ups in the Chu clan would probably look for Chu Tianlu at the first opportunity to find out the truth. Of course, if it was someone else, they would at least give Chu Tianlu a chance to speak. They definitely wouldn't be like Chu Hongding, who directly accused Chu Tianlu. Just as Chu Tianlu was about to speak, Chu Hongding waved his hand and said resolutely, forget it. I reckon you won't tell the truth anyway. Guards, lock up this traitor and his two companions first. Then interrogate them carefully. I don't believe that you won't speak. Chu Tianlu didn't even allow him to speak. How did it become that he wouldn't speak? Lin Yi admired Chu Hongding's way of doing things. He was clearly bullying honest people. Only Chu Tianlu would do this. If Lin Yi was in Chu Tianlu's position, he would have killed him with a single slap. After Chu Hongding finished speaking, the two Chu clan members at the peak of the early gold core stage immediately unleashed their auras to the fullest. They fiercely pressed down on Chu Tianlu, Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing. Bing Wuqing, who had received Lin Yi's warning, naturally didn't make any strange movements. Otherwise, if the Chu clan found out that she was using the aura of a gold core cultivator to deal with a nascent soul cultivator, they would probably just slit their own throats. Wouldn't that be a less painful death? Chu Tianlu wanted to remind his clansmen that of the two people who had come today, one was a genuine nascent soul cultivator, and the other was a ruthless person who could easily crush a nascent soul cultivator. They should never offend them. Unfortunately, under the pressure of 2 gold core cultivators, at the peak of the early gold core stage, he couldn't even open his mouth. Of course, Chu Hongding wouldn't let Chu Tianlu speak. Not all of the Chu clan higher-ups present were on Chu Hongding's side. At least half of them were neutral. Although he didn't know what had happened to Chu Tianliang. Since Chu Wenshang and Chu Tianlu were both dead, it was very likely that the Chu clan's treasure he had secretly given to Chu Tianliang had already been exposed to Chu Tianlu. Chapter 5471. A Genius in a Second. Remember love? We provide you with exciting novels to read. No matter what, this matter could not be made known to the neutral higher-ups. Thus, Chu Hongding had already instructed them not to give Chu Tianlu a chance to speak. Tianlu, don't resist anymore. Otherwise, you'll really be labeled a traitor. Be a good boy and come with us to the discipline hall. One of the 2 peak early golden core experts advised him coldly. Of course, this was just a formality. Whether Chu Tianlu resisted or not made no difference in their eyes. When Chu Tianlu saw that Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing didn't make a move to save him from his predicament, he didn't feel disappointed at all. Instead, he felt very fortunate. Otherwise, if the 2 of them were to fall out with each other, it would be enough to destroy the entire Chu clan. Lin Yi transmitted his voice to Chu Tianlu and Bing Wuqing without batting an eyelid. Listen to them. Let's go and see what they're up to. The current situation was still not enough for the Chu clan to voluntarily annul the marriage with the Yiling sect. Of course, Lin Yi could use his own strength and influence to intimidate the Chu clan, but that would be disadvantageous. After all, Lin Yi was in the wrong here. As long as no one provoked him, he was usually very reasonable. Of course, if others directly came knocking on his door, then Lin Yi would have nothing to worry about. Hearing Lin Yi's telepathic transmission, the 2 of them cooperated and allowed the 2 golden core experts of the Chu clan to place a restriction on their bodies that sealed their powers. Of course, such a restriction would only be effective on cultivators below the golden core stage. Bing Wuqing and Lin Yi, who were in the form of their primordial spirits, simply ignored it. Seeing that Chu Tianlu was easily restrained, Chu Hongding visibly relaxed. At the same time, a trace of ruthlessness flashed across his eyes. Whether Chu Tianliang was dead or alive, he would take this opportunity to kill Chu Tianlu. Lin Yi and the other 2 were escorted to the discipline hall by the 2 peak early golden core experts. It was actually just a small courtyard in a corner, but there was a dungeon underneath it. It was large enough to imprison cultivators, including those at the golden core stage. The 2 members of the Chu clan imprisoned Lin Yi and the other 2 in 3 separate cells. Then, without saying a word, they left the prison with cold faces. With a wave of his hand, Lin Yi used his zhenqi to clear a clean area on the ground. Then he casually sat down cross-legged. Chu Tianlu, who was next door, approached. Ashamed, he said to Lin Yi, "Senior Lin, I truly am sorry. It was because of this junior's matters that I implicated you." Lin Yi waved his hand indifferently and said, "It doesn't matter. Besides, I also know what's going on with Chu Tianliang and his 2 accomplices. Don't worry, when your family comes to interrogate you, I'll testify for you." "Thank you, Senior Lin." Chu Tianlu expressed his gratitude very sincerely. However, Lin Yi could sense that he was not thanking Lin Yi for testifying for him, but for not attacking the Chu clan with Bing Wuqing. If it were any other nascent soul-old monster, it would be impossible for them to endure such treatment from the Chu clan. However, Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing had cooperated with the Chu clan without saying a word. For Chu Tianlu, who placed the Chu clan above all else, he was naturally grateful. "Don't mention it. The people who will interrogate you are already here." Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. His divine sense had already sensed that Chu Hongding and the other 2 members of the Chu clan were entering the dungeon. The only difference from before was that Chu Hongding did not walk in the center this time. The one in the center was a man who was slightly older than him. It seemed that his status was higher than Chu Hongding's. When Chu Tianlu heard Lin Yi's words, he turned his head in shock. However, he did not see anyone enter the dungeon. It was clear that in terms of divine sense, Chu Tianlu was worlds apart from Lin Yi. After a while, Chu Hengding and the other two followed the winding staircase and arrived at the dungeon where Chu Tianlu and the others were imprisoned. Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing did not move. They treated the three of them as air. Only Chu Tianlu quickly turned to the side of the corridor and respectfully cupped his hands in salute. Chu Tianlu greets Great Elder and Third Elder. Although Chu Tianlu did not greet Chu Hengding this time, he still nodded as a greeting. Lin Yi was speechless at his procrastination. Since they had already shed all pretense of cordiality, why bother with such a despicable person? If it were Lin Yi, he would have either slapped him to death or completely ignored him. The cultivator at the peak of the late Golden Elixir realm was the Chu family's great elder, Chu Yunting. When he saw Chu Tianlu, he nodded slightly and said, "Tianlu, what exactly happened? Tell me, the great elder." The other late Golden Elixir realm cultivator was the third elder that Chu Tianlu had mentioned. He was also the person in charge of the Chu family's discipline hall. His dark face was expressionless. He only looked at Chu Tianlu coldly. He did not speak, nor did he move. Without waiting for Chu Tianlu to speak, Chu Hengding interrupted. "Great elder, what else is there to ask? Tianliang, Wenshang and Xingping acted together, but the three of them have not returned. Only Chu Tianlu has returned. It's obvious that he colluded with outsiders to harm his brothers. This kind of person should be executed immediately." Chu Yunting frowned slightly and said, "Hengding, what exactly happened can only be concluded after an investigation. How can you sentence him so hastily? Tianlu is a direct descendant of our Chu family. It's possible that he will become the family head in the future. He just can't be allowed to become the family head." Chu Hengding sneered inwardly, but he did not back down. He retorted, "Great elder, I, Chu Hengding, beg to differ. Only Chu Tianlu has returned. Who knows if what he says is true or not? In any case, Tianliang and the others haven't returned. Won't everything be decided by Chu Tianlu's mouth?" The Chu family's way of doing things is truly an eye-opener. Lin Yi could not help but mock. He cast a sidelong glance at Chu Hengding disdainfully and said, "Even though I've only known him for a short while, I understand what kind of person Chu Tianlu is. Getting him to spout nonsense and lie is even harder than killing him. On the other hand, Hengding medicinal cauldron or whatnot, spouting nonsense is your ultimate skill, isn't it?" Chu Hengding glared fiercely at Lin Yi and said, "Little brat, what are you, an outsider, interrupting us for? Once we've dealt with the traitor of our Chu family, it'll naturally be your turn to settle the debt. There's no need for you to jump out and seek death in such a hurry, is there? I can't be bothered with your Chu family's matters. However, as for Chu Tianliang's matter, because I'm a witness, I'm reminding you out of goodwill. That brat should already be dead, right? However, this has nothing to do with Chu Tianlu. He was merely trapped in a secret realm during Taishi Island's training. He couldn't escape himself, so he can't blame others. If Lin Yi said he would testify for Chu Tianlu, he would definitely do as he said." Chapter 5472. A Genius in a Second. Remember love? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. However, Lin Yi reckoned that Chu Hengding wouldn't believe him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stopped Chu Tianlu from speaking. But this was fine. In any case, Lin Yi was here to stir up trouble. How could he be afraid of stirring up trouble? Chu Hengding sneered. "You and Chu Tianlu are clearly jackals of the same tribe. Do you think we'll believe your words? Tianliang's soul jade tablet hasn't even shattered yet. How could he be dead? You've clearly imprisoned him somewhere, haven't you?" "Second uncle, Senior Lin speaks the truth." Chu Tianlu finally found an opportunity to speak, but he was rudely interrupted by Chu Hengding. "Shut up. What right does a shameless traitor have to speak in front of us? And you're even shamelessly calling this junior senior? He's just an ant at the great circle of foundation establishment. What kind of senior is he?" Chu Hengding roared. After lecturing Chu Tianlu, he immediately turned to Chu Yunting and said, "Great elder, there's no need to ask any more questions. These three must have colluded with each other, and colluded with each other. We can be sure just by listening to their lies." Chu Yunting furrowed his brows and said, "You can't be so arbitrary. Hengding, I know how you feel. Tianliang is your most beloved son. It's normal for you to be worried when something happened to him. After all, Tianliang is also my descendant. However, this matter concerns the heavenly road. Both sides are flesh. We have to investigate thoroughly before we can conclude the case. Great Elder, what else is there to investigate? These three are all accomplices. You're willing to listen to their lies, but I don't want to waste time. Third Elder, what do you think? Can't we just execute them? Chu Hengding was extremely forceful. Not only did he directly reject the Great Elder's suggestion, he even dragged the Third Elder of the Discipline Hall into the water. Although the Third Elder was in charge of the Discipline Hall, he was secretly one of Chu Hengding's subordinates. That was why Chu Hengding had sent Chu Tianlu and the others into the Discipline Hall just now. Now that they were in the Discipline Hall, they were in Chu Hengding's territory. He could do whatever he wanted. He didn't believe he couldn't get the confession he wanted. The only thing that surprised Chu Hengding was that the Great Elder, Chu Yunting, had hurried over after hearing the news. The Third Elder didn't look at Chu Hengding. Instead, he looked indifferent and said expressionlessly, "Everything has to be clarified. We can't act too carelessly. But since Chu Tianliang and the others have disappeared, there are no witnesses. Chu Tianlu is the greatest suspect. Thus, Chu Tianlu's testimony isn't of Chu." Chu Hengding said. Third Chu can't, Chu while Elder can't. Chu Hengding glanced at the Great Elder complacently and said in high spirits, "In my opinion, Chu Tianlu the traitor should be executed immediately. The two accomplices he colluded with should accompany him as well." Chu Yunting's expression was rather unsightly. He already knew that Chu Hengding wanted the position of family head, but he didn't expect him to be this arrogant and despotic. He didn't even care about him, the Great Elder. "Chu Hengding, we must report this matter to the family head and let him make a decision. After all, this involves two outstanding direct descendants. It can't be decided so casually." Chu Yunting felt a wave of helplessness when faced with Chu Hengding and the Third Elder. He could only bring up the family head. Speaking of which, he didn't have much of a relationship with Chu Hengding and Chu Tianlu. He was completely neutral, and the kind that didn't have any selfish motives. Protecting Chu Tianlu was for the sake of the Chu family, but if he had to fight Chu Hengding to the death, just to protect Chu Tianlu, that was something he had to consider carefully. The family head is cultivating in seclusion. We can't disturb him before his birthday, so there's no need to trouble the family head with such a small matter. Otherwise, why would he need us elders? Aren't we supposed to share the family head's burdens at times like this? Chu Hengding had the upper hand, and immediately put on a righteous expression. Hee, it's rare to see such a shameless person. Wuching, why don't you come and take a look as well? Just treat it as a monkey show. Lin Yi's face was full of mockery. He couldn't be bothered to waste time listening to this guy's pretentious nonsense. Hearing Lin Yi's call, Bing Wuching slowly walked to the side of the fence. She stuck her head out and said, "Boss, are you talking about that old monkey? He's so ugly, how can I not look?" It was rare for this cold guy to have a sense of humor. Lin Yi laughed and said, "How can you be like this? Why are you speaking the truth blindly? He's ugly, but you don't have to insult a monkey, do you?" On the side, Chu Tianlu came to his senses and couldn't help but snicker. He was an honest man, but even a man made of clay had a temper. Chu Tianlu was quite annoyed by Chu Hengding's aggressiveness. Hearing Bing Wuching and Lin Yi's ridicule of Chu Tianlu, he immediately felt that his anger had been vented. Chu Hengding's face turned red, and he said coldly, "You two outsiders, since you can't wait to die, I'll fulfill your wish. I'll send you to reincarnation as soon as possible." Before he finished speaking, his peak-level mid-stage golden elixir aura was immediately revealed. He raised his hands, ready to attack Lin Yi and Bing Wuching. Chu Yunting's eyes narrowed, but he didn't open his mouth to stop them. Chu Tianlu was a direct descendant of the Chu family, and it was only right for him to protect him. As for Lin Yi and Bing Wuching, they weren't worthy of Chu Yunting risking falling out with Chu Hengding. "Stop. That's Senior Bing Wuching of the Snow Sword faction." Seeing that Chu Hengding was about to attack Lin Yi and Bing Wuching, Chu Tianlu immediately paled. He obviously wasn't worried about Chu Hengding's safety, but he was afraid that Chu Hengding would anger Lin Yi and Bing Wuqing, which would bring disaster to the Chu family. The Snow Sword faction? Chu Hengding stopped in his tracks and immediately became hesitant. In terms of power, the Snow Sword faction naturally far surpassed the Chu family, and he had also heard of Bing Wuqing's name. She was a genius disciple of the Snow Sword faction, and she was already a early-stage golden elixir expert at such a young age. One couldn't blame Chu Hengding for being ignorant and inexperienced, not knowing that Bing Wuqing had already become a nascent soul-old freak. The Chu family simply didn't have enough resources. The 4 big and 10 small clans and schools basically already knew that the Snow Sword faction had 3 nascent soul-old freaks, and that its rise was unstoppable. However, Bing Wuqing didn't go to all the other clans and schools with great fanfare. After all, so it was normal that the second-ranked clans and schools hadn't received the news yet. Chu Tianlu nodded forcefully and said, "That's right, it's Senior Bing Wuqing from the Snow Sword faction. She's a nascent soul-old ancestor of the Snow Sword faction, and she's on equal footing with grandfather. Second uncle, you mustn't neglect her." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.